A humble girl delivered a package to the wrong company. A billionaire CEO mistook her for a new hire, and after 5 minutes of talking, he made a life-changing decision. Hello, viewer. Thanks for joining us. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. Melanie Allen carefully lifted a bundle of lavender-hued tulips and placed them into a wicker basket lined with newspaper. The heady scent of fresh blooms filled the cozy interior of the Petal Pusher's flower shop, a modest but welcoming storefront nestled on a lively side street in Brooklyn. At 28C, with gently wavy brown hair, usually tied into a low, practical bun, Melanie often felt as though she was simply part of the backdrop here, another fixture among countless arrangements in the shop. Yet behind her soft hazel eyes lay a simmering curiosity about the world and a heart brimming with literary quotes she had committed to memory since childhood. She hummed under her breath, recalling a line from Emily Dickinson she had read the night before. She found solace in lines of poetry, perhaps because they felt safer than the real-life hopes and fears she often buried. Each morning, she arrived at Petal Pusher's precisely at 7:30. The shop was owned by Mrs. Clara Gable, a warm-hearted woman in her early 60s whose gentle encouragement had become a steady anchor in Melanie's otherwise uncertain life. Even as Melanie arranged stems of freshly cut flowers, she would silently recite favorite passages, like gentle spells that, for a few moments, kept her dreams alive. "Melanie, dear, don't forget the hydrangeas by the window," Mrs. Gable reminded her, stepping into the workroom at the back, clad in a simple floral apron. Mrs. Gable had silver-streaked hair drawn into a neat bun. She seemed to carry a perpetual smile that lit up her kind, round face. Despite the difference in their ages, Melanie sometimes found more comfort in Mrs. Gable's maternal presence than in gatherings of her own peers. "Yes, ma'am," Melanie replied, gently brushing dust from the broad green leaves of the hydrangeas. "I'm about to rearrange them." She glanced toward the shop window, where the sun seeped through, illuminating floating dust motes that spun in the air. She found little pockets of beauty everywhere, the soft curve of a rose petal, the dapple of morning light, or the way a child pressed his nose against the glass to peer in at the colorful bouquets. As she worked, her thoughts drifted. She recalled the creative writing class she had once dreamed of attending at a prestigious program in Manhattan. She'd applied, poured her heart into her personal statement, and never heard back. The sting of that silence lingered. Over time, she learned to hide her ambitions. Delivering flowers in some ways was safe. She could simply observe people from a distance, never risking more than a polite smile and a quick exchange at a doorstep or reception desk. "You know, I can practically see the wheels turning in your head," Mrs. Gable teased gently, setting down a watering can. "I've known you for 2 years now. You've got more to offer than you realize. Don't be afraid to chase after bigger dreams." Melanie shrugged, feeling a pinch of guilt. She told Mrs. Gable a little about her writing, but only enough to hint at her unspoken desires. "I guess I'm comfortable here, that's all," she said. "There's something soothing about the routine." "Maybe so," Mrs. Gable replied, "but don't let comfort blind you to opportunity. Something might come along unexpectedly, and you have to be ready." Before Melanie could respond, her phone buzzed in the front pocket of her jeans. She slipped off her gloves and checked the screen. The store's main line was ringing, a short, sharp trill that always put her on alert. She walked over to the countertop and pressed the call button, balancing the phone between her shoulder and ear as she peered at a small notepad for taking orders. "Petal Pushers, Melanie speaking. How can we help you today?" she asked in her warmest tone. The caller, A woman with a clipped Manhattan accent explained that she needed a very specific orchid arrangement, rare purple orchid stems that cost a small fortune, delivered to a high-profile corporation in Midtown. The transaction was part of a corporate congratulatory gift for a Mr. Howard. The tone in the caller's voice indicated she expected everything to be flawless. As Melanie jotted details onto the notepad, her pulse quickened. Ordinarily, she took deliveries all over the city. But something about this order sounded more serious. Howard Innovations was no small company. It was rumored to be a massive tech conglomerate, the kind that inhabited the sleek skyscrapers Melanie found daunting. She tried not to let the nerves show in her voice. "Yes, we can handle that," she said, forcing herself to stay calm. "Tomorrow morning works." "Could you confirm the building's address and floor number?" By the time she hung up, the notepad held scrawled information about an elaborate arrangement worth more money than she made in a week. Mrs. Gable picked up on Melanie's visible tension and came around the counter, placing a supportive hand on her shoulder. "You'll do fine," Mrs. Gable said, her tone encouraging. "All you have to do is deliver it, right?" Melanie nodded, but she could feel the flutter of anxiety in her stomach. It was just a delivery, but the corporation's name alone suggested a world so much bigger and more glittering than her usual route. Her day-to-day typically involved dropping bouquets at brownstone stoops or busy diners. Working a high-level corporate job had never been part of her plans, but she couldn't deny a spark of curiosity. Maybe Mrs. Gable was right. Maybe she shouldn't ignore new possibilities, no matter how unexpected. She set aside her notes on the orchid order, determined to prepare everything perfectly first thing in the morning. Beyond the flower-filled windows of the shop, life continued in Brooklyn. Cars honking, neighbors chatting on sidewalks, the swirl of a million different stories crossing paths. For Melanie, the next day promised something different, something she couldn't yet name. Somehow, the whiff of possibility made her chest tighten with equal measures of fear and hope. Morning light cut through the Brooklyn skyline as Melanie balanced a coffee cup in one hand and her phone in the other, triple-checking the directions to Howard Innovations. She stood outside The Morning Grind, a trendy cafe where her best friend Chloe worked as a barista. The scent of roasted beans wafted from the doorway, making Melanie's stomach rumble. She always skipped breakfast when she was nervous, which meant she was running on jitters and hope. Inside, she spotted Chloe behind the espresso machine, expertly foaming milk. With short hair dyed a cheerful shade of pink and a confident grin, Chloe wore her trademark black apron-like armor. At 28, the same age as Melanie, she had a self-assured air that Melanie often wished she could emulate. "Hey, you!" Chloe pushed a double-shot latte across the counter. "You look spooked. Something big happening at the flower shop?" Melanie sighed and took a grateful sip, letting the warmth of the coffee settle her nerves. "I have a special delivery for Howard Innovations. Have you heard of them?" Chloe whistled. "Heard of them? They're basically half the reason Midtown's skyline exists. Huge company. My cousin once interviewed there and said the place felt like another planet." "Well," Melanie said with a weak laugh, "looks like I'll be stepping foot on that planet today. I have to deliver a fancy orchid arrangement to some big shot named Mr. Howard." She pointed to the cardboard floral carrier on a nearby table, containing slender boxes meant to protect the delicate orchid stems. Mrs. Gable spent extra time making sure every stem was perfect. Chloe glanced at the boxes and then back at Melanie's anxious expression. "This could be good for you, you know. You're always telling me you want to do something more than just deliveries. You have a real knack for picking up on people's hidden stories. You just need a chance to share that insight." "I'm not sure the typical corporate exec is interested in my perspective," Melanie replied, a wry twist on her lips. But Mrs. Gable said I should see this as a possibility, not just a job, Still, I just want to do it right and keep petal pushers looking professional. No big fiasco, no messing up the address. Chloe handed another coffee to a waiting customer before turning back with an arched eyebrow. Look, if you want bigger opportunities, you've got to let them find you sometimes. And if this is one, go for it. The worst that can happen is you drop off the flowers and never see these suits again. But the best, maybe you leave an impression. Melanie inhaled, letting the comforting aroma of espresso fill her lungs. You're right, I guess. It's just that stepping into a skyscraper full of high-powered executives feels like strolling into an alien spaceship, Chloe smirked. Well, in that case, don't forget your spacesuit. She tapped the side of her head meaningfully. Seriously, I mean it. You are so much more than you let on. If some big CEO got a glimpse of that brain of yours, even for a second, he'd realize you're wasted on street deliveries. Melanie felt her cheeks warm. Sometimes, Chloe's direct praise made her uneasy, as if acknowledging her potential would oblige her to act on it. I'll just try not to faint on the 50-somethingth floor, she murmured. Finishing her latte, she made her way back outside. The city's energy was in full swing. Commuters rushing for subways, business people hailing cabs, the relentless pulse of traffic. She carefully loaded the orchid boxes into the flower shop's van. For a moment, she lingered, double-checking that each blossom was secure. Rare purple orchids, a color so deep it bordered on violet, with delicate petals that suggested an air of exclusivity, very fitting for a place like Howard Innovations. Mrs. Gable appeared in the shop doorway to see her off. Don't overthink it, child. You've done trickier deliveries, and everything turned out just fine, she said kindly. Just remember, steady hands and a calm heart. Melanie smiled, trying to absorb the comfort in those words. I'll call you when I'm done, she promised. Starting the van, she took a deep breath. She had delivered arrangements to upscale events before, weddings, corporate dinners, once even to a celebrity's birthday party. Yet, somehow, this request felt different. Maybe it was the name recognition, or the overshadowing sense that Howard Innovations wasn't just any client. It was the kind of place that reeked of wealth and power, the kind that rarely intersected with her quiet life of daydreams and literary musings. As she merged into traffic, her phone chimed with a calendar reminder for the morning delivery. In an hour, I'll be handing these orchids over, she thought, chewing the inside of her cheek. Then, with a sudden pang of curiosity, she wondered about Mr. Howard. What if he was just another board executive? What if he was precisely the sort of person who never even noticed a delivery person's face? I'll do my job and get out, she told herself, shifting gears. Yet beneath that practical resolve, a faint sense of anticipation fluttered. Maybe Chloe was right. Maybe opportunity didn't always come in tidy packages. Sometimes it arrived disguised as a routine task. And as she drove toward the shining towers of Manhattan, she allowed herself a momentary flicker of excitement, wondering what lay beyond those tall glass doors. Melanie could feel her stomach twist the moment she arrived at the imposing skyscraper that housed Howard Innovations. The tower soared into the Manhattan sky, its facade a flawless stretch of reflective windows that captured the morning sun. She parked the van in a nearby loading zone, stepping onto the bustling sidewalk with the orchid boxes in hand. Business people brushed past her, each seemingly laser-focused on their destinations. It felt like stepping into a rushing current of suits and cell phones. Inside the lobby, polished marble floors gleamed under rows of recessed lighting. The expanse reminded her of a high-end hotel more than an office building. A massive digital directory scrolled through the names of various subsidiaries belonging to Howard Innovations. She glanced at her phone, rechecking the note. Mr. Howard, 51st floor, Executive offices. That directive pulsed in her mind like a red alert. She approached the reception desk, where a stern-faced security guard eyed her uniform, a green petal-pusher's polo shirt and simple black pants. "Delivery for Mr. Howard," she managed, her voice subdued by the hush of the lobby. The guard glanced at the boxes of orchids. "You can sign in here," he said, sliding a clipboard forward. "Freight elevator is around the corner. Take it to floor 51, then follow the signs to the main reception area." Melanie nodded, scribbling her name and the time of entry. She felt a tiny bead of sweat forming at her temple. Balancing the boxes, she made her way across the polished floor, footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. Nearby, a few office workers and well-dressed visitors sipped coffee while waiting for the regular elevators. She caught a glimpse of them eyeing her delivery attire, which sharpened her sense of being an outsider. Once inside the freight elevator, the hum of machinery felt too loud in the cramped metal box. She stared at the floor numbers as they ticked upward, bracing herself for the inevitable moment she would step into an environment worlds away from her cozy flower shop. At each stop, the elevator jerked slightly, sending her pulse racing. It was a faint preview of the adrenaline that always struck her in unfamiliar places. When she reached the 51st floor, the doors clanged open onto a hallway bathed in sleek, neutral tones. Frosted glass walls and abstract art prints gave the space a minimalist, high-end aura. The air smelled faintly of fresh paint and expensive cologne. Melanie's heart thumped. It wasn't her first corporate delivery, but never before had the environment felt so intimidating. Her instructions said to drop the orchids at the executive reception desk, yet upon scanning the corridor, she noticed that several signs pointed to different divisions: strategic operations, financial analysis, global partnerships. She frowned, stepping tentatively past a stylish lounge area furnished with modern sofas and a coffee bar. No one else seemed to be around, at least not in this wing. As she searched for the reception area, her gaze drifted to the floor-to-ceiling windows, showcasing a panoramic view of Manhattan. For a fleeting moment, she felt dizzy. This vantage point was breathtaking, but also a stark reminder of how far she was from her comfort zone. In the glass reflection, she could see her silhouette, a small figure cradling a large box of orchids, dwarfed by the grandeur around her. "Could I be in the wrong place?" she murmured under her breath. The hallway was eerily quiet, except for a distant hum of conversation behind closed doors. Normally, front desk areas were lively with phones ringing and people bustling about. Here, everything seemed deserted. Her chest tightened with apprehension. She hated the idea of making a mistake, especially with such an important order. She hadn't even seen a typical receptionist's desk. Just as she thought about retracing her steps to check the elevator lobby again, the door of a nearby office cracked open. A middle-aged woman stepped out, scanning the corridor. "Oh, are you the delivery person?" the woman asked politely. "We usually expect staff to come through the main executive reception near the opposite hall, but let me see if I can help." Melanie forced a polite smile. "I'm bringing these orchids for Mr. Howard. I might have taken a wrong turn. Could you point me in the right direction?" The woman gestured back down the corridor. "You'll want the suite near the end of that hallway. It's labeled Chief Executive Office. Someone there should be able to sign for those flowers, or at least direct you further." Relief flooded Melanie, though her nerves still buzzed. She thanked the woman and hurried on. Despite her best efforts to remain calm, the plush carpet beneath her shoes and the hush of the corridor made her every step feel oversized. Her breath caught in her throat as she reached a set of opaque double doors with a sleek metal plaque, "Jacob Howard, CEO." Realizing she was definitely not where she'd intended to be, she had only wanted to find a receptionist or an assistant, she paused, gulping. The instructions had said floor 51, But was it possible that she was supposed to stop earlier at a different reception desk? The note had been vague, simply stating, "Delivery to Mr. Howard, 51st floor." She eyed the door, half tempted to turn around. Yet she recalled Mrs. Gable's parting advice: steady hands and a calm heart. Taking a breath, she thought about how humiliating it would be to trudge back through the corridor, possibly missing the person she was meant to see. Summoning what little courage she had, she raised a hand and tapped softly on the door. If no one answered, she'd take that as a sign to retreat. To her surprise, she heard a voice from within, firm, low, and resonant. "Yes, come in." Melanie swallowed and pushed the door open, stepping over the threshold. The sudden shift in atmosphere felt like crossing into another world. Whatever awaited her in Mr. Howard's office, she was certain of one thing: this was not the simple key, no-frills drop-off she had anticipated. Stepping into the office, Melanie felt an immediate sense of awe. The space was bathed in natural light, streaming through a wall of windows that overlooked the Manhattan skyline. Everything was meticulously arranged, from the minimalist artwork on the walls to the charcoal-gray desk that stood at the center, illuminated by a sleek, modern lamp. It was the epitome of power and refinement, and it stopped her breath for a split second. Behind that imposing desk sat a man with striking blue eyes and an impeccably tailored suit. His posture suggested confidence, though his expression revealed a certain restlessness, as though half his mind was already racing toward the next problem. He appeared to be in his mid-30s, his hair neatly styled in a way that made him look both polished and approachable, if one didn't notice the intensity in his gaze. He looked up from a stack of documents, a faint crease forming between his brows. "You must be Dr. Sharma," he said, standing up. "I've been waiting. Glad you could finally make it." Melanie blinked, her heart jarring against her ribs. Dr. Sharma. Confusion sparked in her mind, but her voice wouldn't come. Before she could correct him, he strode around the desk, extending a hand. Unsure of how to react, she juggled the orchid boxes in her arms, nearly fumbling them. "Here, let me help." He gently took the top box from her, placing it on a nearby credenza. Up close, his eyes were even more penetrating, an electric shade of blue that made her anxiety spike. "I didn't expect you to come carrying flowers, but I suppose you're full of surprises. I've read your research proposals, and I'm eager to see how your unconventional methods might help us." She opened her mouth to say something, but not a single coherent sentence formed. She cast a quick glance around the room, searching for a clue that might clarify how this misunderstanding had happened. Perhaps the real Dr. Sharma was someone new the company was expecting. But why would Mr. Howard assume that person was her? I think there's been a mix-up," she began softly, but the man, Jacob Howard, presumably, continued without missing a beat. "The important thing is you're here. Anya Sharma, right?" "I'm Jacob Howard," he explained, though the introduction was more of a formality. "I've been fascinated by your ideas, especially your commentary on consumer behavior. I admire your work's humanity. It's not often we find specialists willing to break from standard data analytics. Honestly, I was counting the minutes until I could pick your brain." Before Melanie could fully process his words, he gestured for her to set the remaining box of orchids down. Her pulse thrummed in her ears. This had escalated too quickly. She was just a delivery person, and now she stood in the presence of the CEO, who believed her to be some brilliant analyst. She inhaled, trying to steady herself enough to correct him. But he seemed so certain. I should explain," she managed, her voice trembling. He gave a half smile and raised a hand. "We can discuss all that soon. Actually, I've got a meeting in about 10 minutes, so let's keep our initial chat brief. But your timing is perfect. I wanted you to see the top floor operations, just to get a feel for our environment. Then we'll head into more detail about your role in the new project. As you can imagine, it's a high priority." Her thoughts spun. She needed to break through the confusion, yet his commanding presence and the shock of the situation made her words come out tangled. "Mr. Howard, sir, I'm not—" Before she could finish, the office door opened and a brisk-looking assistant in a crisp navy suit peeked inside. "Jacob, the board members are ready whenever you are," he said, then seemed to notice Melanie. "Oh, you must be Dr. Sharma." With a quick nod in her direction, he addressed Jacob again. "Should I bring coffee for 2 or 3? "Coffee for 2, Jacob replied, waving the assistant away. Then he turned back to Melanie, a curious gleam in his eyes. "We'll have to talk about those flowers too. Interesting choice. Orchids are my mother's favorite, so I can't say I'm not intrigued." Melanie stared at the boxes she had brought, her mind racing. Explaining her real identity would probably take more than a few seconds, and from the man's posture, he was already a step away from rushing into his next meeting. She glanced at her phone, which was buzzing silently in her back pocket. Perhaps it was Mrs. Gable checking on her, or someone from the actual receiving desk wondering where she was. "Why don't you come with me to the next meeting?" Jacob suggested calmly. "You won't have to say much right now. I just want you to get a sense of our operational scale. After that, we can regroup, and you can tell me what you think about our approach to consumer outreach." He paused, a hint of a smile playing at his lips. "I'm aware your methods are unconventional, Dr. Sharma, but that's exactly why I hired you." Melanie's head felt light, her chest tight. This was spiraling into something unbelievable. Part of her wanted to sprint out of the office with the orchid boxes in hand and never look back. Another part, a tiny, curious spark inside her, was intrigued. Nobody had ever mistaken her for a brilliant specialist before, nor asked for her opinions with such seriousness. It was tempting, dangerously so, to linger just for a moment in this alternate universe. Yes, okay," she found herself replying, her voice almost unrecognizable. "We can talk more after your meeting." Jacob nodded in satisfaction, then reached for a tablet on his desk. "That's what I like to hear," he said, stepping toward the door. "Let's get going." As she followed him out, Melanie felt an electric hum in the air. She took one last glance at the orchids, still perched on the credenza, and wondered whether they symbolized a door she never intended to open, or an opportunity she'd be foolish to let slip away. Those 5 minutes in Jacob Howard's office had unraveled Melanie's entire plan for the day. Instead of simply dropping the orchid arrangement and retreating to the safety of the petal pusher's van, she found herself trailing behind the CEO down a polished hallway. Each step felt surreal. She could still feel her cheeks flushing from how effortlessly he had mistaken her for the new analyst. Jacob led her into a smaller conference room, separated from the main boardroom by a glass partition. The environment hummed with quiet efficiency. Professionals in tailored suits tapped at tablets, exchanged hushed remarks, and sipped espresso from stainless steel mugs. A large screen displayed a slideshow of financial summaries and product roadmaps. Melanie instinctively shrank into a corner, trying to become invisible while her heart thudded in her chest. "All right, let's keep this quick," Jacob announced, glancing at his watch. His presence alone seemed to command the room. A hush descended as half a dozen key team members turned their attention to him. "We have the board waiting, but Dr. Sharma is finally here, so I want to give her a brief overview. She's going to be instrumental in analyzing new consumer trends and behaviors for our upcoming product launch." Melanie's breath caught. Half of her screamed to interrupt, to explain that she was just the delivery girl. Yet every time she opened her mouth, she felt a helpless sense of dizziness, and the words tangled on her tongue. Jacob's introduction had set the stage so definitively that she feared creating a catastrophic scene if she publicly corrected him now. Maybe if she waited until they were alone, she could fix the misunderstanding privately. Jacob gestured to her. Any initial thoughts, Dr. Sharma, on how we might differentiate ourselves in a saturated market? I recall from your interview notes that you emphasize storytelling and emotional resonance with consumers. Would you say that extends here? The entire room turned to stare expectantly. Melanie's palms grew damp. She could sense the attention, the reverent hush normally reserved for experts who command respect. For a second, she considered bolting for the door, but the memory of how easily Jacob had placed his trust in her made her pause. He obviously admired what he believed to be her unique perspective. Her mind scrambled for something, anything to say. She had no formal knowledge about Howard Innovation's product pipelines, but she did understand human behavior in a less technical way. She thought of parallels from literature, from the stories she immersed herself in. Suddenly, an odd calm washed over her. Perhaps she could offer a small piece of insight without revealing her ignorance. If she stayed general, maybe they wouldn't realize how little she knew. Yes, I'd say emotional resonance is key, she began, her voice quiet but clear. Consumers connect with narratives that reflect their values, so focusing on how a product solves a specific human need or how it makes daily life more meaningful could be far more compelling than simply listing features. It's about engaging curiosity, empathy, maybe even nostalgia. A hush followed, but it wasn't the stunned silence of discovering a fraud. Several people nodded thoughtfully. One young manager typed notes on her tablet, while an older executive exchanged a glance with his colleague. Jacob's expression shifted from mild impatience to genuine intrigue. Fascinating, he said. We've heard plenty about market statistics, but rarely do we discuss consumer connection in such personal terms. That's exactly what I wanted. Good, he turned to his staff. Let's keep that perspective in mind as we finalize the marketing strategy. We'll reconvene for a deeper dive next week. He gestured for Melanie to follow him back into the hallway, giving the team a final nod. As soon as the conference room door closed behind them, he exhaled. We're short on time, but that was a decent start. You seem to have the knack for weaving human insight into corporate objectives. It's refreshing. She gulped, forcing a slight laugh. Thank you, that was unexpected. I'm glad you made it in, even if you're a bit late. Jacob smirked, leading her toward his office again. I was worried we'd have to postpone some projects. Those 5 minutes of conversation were enough to confirm why I hired you in the first place. Your perspective is exactly what Howard Innovations needs. Melanie felt a jolt at his mention of 5 minutes. In that absurdly short span, her entire life had taken a wild detour. As he opened his office door for her, she knew she had to address the misunderstanding immediately. She stepped inside, turning to face him, summoning the courage to speak. Mr. Howard Jacob, she began, her throat tight. About this morning, I didn't come here expecting to... He raised a hand, silencing her gently. I know it can be overwhelming. But trust me, the rest of the team will catch up to your style soon enough. You handled yourself in that room brilliantly. I see why your credentials got my attention. He paused, tilting his head slightly. Look, I have a call with the board in a few minutes, so why don't you get settled? My assistant can show you to the office we set up for you. We'll talk further after the call. She opened her mouth, but again her explanation stalled. His phone buzzed on the desk, and he grabbed it with an apologetic shrug. 1 second, he murmured, stepping aside to take the call. Melanie stood there, her stomach coiled in knots. She glanced around. noticing the orchid boxes still resting by the credenza. In 5 minutes of conversation, he had seen more promise in her than most people had in a lifetime, except he thought she was someone else. The words, "I'm just the flower delivery girl," hovered on her tongue, but the swirl of phone calls, meeting schedules, and the unstoppable momentum of the day made her feel trapped. As Jacob wrapped up his call, giving her an encouraging wave, she realized she was in too deep to slip away unnoticed. She told herself she'd confess the truth as soon as he finished. Yet, as the minutes crawled by, a tiny, reckless hope flickered in her chest. Maybe, just maybe, she could ride this wave a little longer. She'd never felt so seen, and that was how, after only 5 minutes of conversation, everything changed. Melanie's first official day at Howard Innovations began with her rising before dawn, anxious energy thrumming through her. She hadn't dared to tell Mrs. Gable the full truth, only that she needed a short leave from petal pushers to explore a surprising opportunity. It pained her to leave the familiar security of the flower shop, but the pull of curiosity was too strong. Despite the guilty knot in her stomach, she wanted to see how far this deception might carry her, even if she promised herself it was only temporary. By 7:15, she was in the sleek, mirrored elevator at Howard Innovations, her reflection revealing tense shoulders under a plain white blouse and grey slacks. She clutched her tote bag, laden with a borrowed laptop and a worn notebook she'd filled with scribbled thoughts during a sleepless night. She had spent hours scouring the internet, inhaling articles on consumer psychology and user experience. While she understood only a fraction of the technical jargon, she hoped a surface-level familiarity might help her pass as the elusive Dr. Anya Sharma. Stepping out onto the same 51st floor she'd visited before, she found the previously quiet corridor teeming with life. Assistants strode briskly, phones pressed to ears, and small groups huddled in hushed discussions. The hush from her first day was gone, replaced by a dynamic bustle that underscored how serious everything here was. Melanie bit her lip, reminding herself she wasn't truly meant to be part of this world. However, Sarah Chen, an enthusiastic junior marketing analyst, intercepted her near the reception desk. With wide, bright eyes, Sarah flashed a relieved grin. "Dr. Sharma, glad you're here. Jacob asked me to show you to your temporary workspace and bring you up to speed on the upcoming product launch. I'm Sarah, by the way, Sarah Chen." Immediately, Melanie registered the open friendliness in Sarah's tone. While her heart hammered at being addressed as Dr. Sharma, she found a disarming warmth in Sarah's expression. Thanks," Melanie managed, hoping her nerves weren't too obvious. She fell into step beside Sarah, absorbing details about market research and consumer segmentation at a dizzying pace. She caught glimpses of charts, acronyms, and references to specialized software. It was more complicated than she'd imagined, but she tried to nod and respond with carefully vague comments. "Yes, exactly," or "That's a valuable perspective." Once in the small office designated for her, Melanie set her bag on a chair. The room felt more like a guest workspace than a permanent setup, just a desk, a lamp, and a window overlooking Midtown. Sarah placed several folders in front of her. "Jacob wants your input on these preliminary findings. We have a bigger team meeting tomorrow. If you need anything, datasets, user surveys, or a quick orientation to our analytics tools, let me know." Melanie swallowed hard, flipping through pages crammed with terms like key performance indicators, market penetration, and brand differentiation. She forced a smile. "I'll review these today, and thank you for the warm welcome." Sarah beamed. "Of course. I'm excited to learn from your, more human-centric approach. Jacob's told us how you'll bring in a unique perspective on consumer emotion. We've been too fixated on numbers, maybe." Melanie managed a nod, inwardly marveling at how convincingly Jacob must have spoken about her. She wondered how long it would be until they all realized she had no doctorate, no formal credentials, and no business picking apart brand strategies. Still, a spark of determination arose. Maybe she could offer something genuine. She possessed a knack for understanding people, a skill sharpened by her years delivering flowers and observing countless human interactions up close. If she applied that to analyzing user behaviors, perhaps she could avoid being unmasked as a fraud for a little while longer. After Sarah left, Melanie glanced at the clock. Half an hour until her first internal meeting, her pulse quickened. She opened her laptop, typed "Consumer Behavior Best Practices" into a search bar, and devoured the top results. Speed reading articles. She scribbled notes in her worn notebook. Pointers about empathy mapping, storytelling in marketing, and bridging data with emotional connections. Though she grasped only the basics, it reminded her of reading literary critiques, looking for deeper meaning beneath a character's actions. Only here, the characters were real-life consumers. Mid-meeting, a cluster of employees gathered around a glossy conference table. Melanie recognized Marcus Thorne, the senior vice president with a calculating stare and impeccably combed salt-and-pepper hair. He wore an expression of mild skepticism from the start, clearly testing the newcomer's expertise. "All right, Dr. Sharma," Marcus said in a measured tone. "We've heard Jacob emphasize your unconventional approach. We're curious how you'd evaluate our user acquisition funnels if we want a bigger Gen Z audience." Melanie's stomach lurched. The group gazed at her expectantly, Sarah included. She took a breath. "Well, from a human perspective, younger audiences often respond to narratives that feel genuine. Overloading them with ads can backfire. We need to ask, where do their values intersect with our product's purpose? And how can we communicate that we genuinely care about what they care about? That emotional sense, authenticity, relevance might matter more to them than just price or brand name." A flicker of interest lit Sarah's eyes, and a few others nodded. Marcus seemed less impressed, but Melanie noticed a shift in his posture, perhaps acknowledging that her argument wasn't nonsense. One man asked a follow-up, referencing user personas. Melanie responded with an anecdote. "I used to deliver flowers to lots of students who'd buy small bouquets to brighten dorm rooms, often on tight budgets. They valued personal touches. The same might apply here. Small gestures, not big flashy campaigns, could resonate better with this demographic." As the meeting progressed, Melanie gained a subtle confidence. Her experiences observing people, seeing couples celebrate, families mourn, co-workers bond, had taught her how individuals respond to sincere gestures. While the technical lingo sometimes slipped past her, she anchored her comments in real, relatable human moments. That angle appeared to intrigue some of the team, who jotted down her remarks. Marcus remained aloof, but at least he had stopped openly glaring. When the meeting concluded, Jacob hovered near the door, having watched from behind a few of the tinted glass panels. He gave Melanie a nod that communicated approval and perhaps even pride. It was a moment she couldn't fully process. How strange it was to feel valued here, valued for a perspective she'd never dreamed could apply in a corporate giant's strategy, and all because of a mistaken identity. She packed her notes, nerves still tingling. She'd survived her first real corporate meeting without being exposed, and to her own astonishment had contributed something meaningful. For now, it felt like a tentative victory. But every passing minute reminded her of the ticking clock. Eventually, the real Dr. Sharma might show up or Marcus would dig too deeply. Until then, Melanie resolved to dive deeper, research, observe, and bring her own brand of insight. If she was going to exist in this borrowed role, She might as well leave a positive mark before the truth inevitably unraveled. Melanie arrived early the following morning, her mind racing with everything she'd read the night before. She had rummaged through corporate case studies online, scribbled notes on consumer empathy, and pored over forums where users ranted about big tech products. She wanted at least a foundation to steady herself. Passing the security checkpoint was routine now. She no longer drew curious stares for carrying a visitor badge, since Jacob had fast-tracked her employee credentials. She was arranging her files in her borrowed office when her phone buzzed. Mrs. Gable's name lit up the screen. Melanie felt a twinge of guilt. She hadn't been able to share much beyond, "I need some personal time away from deliveries." She answered softly, "Hello, Mrs. Gable. Everything okay?" "Mrs." Gable's gentle voice came through. "I'm fine, dear. Just worried about you. Thought I'd check in. The shop misses you already." Melanie's throat tightened. She missed the shop too, the comforting sense of soil and blooms, the warm sense of belonging. "I'm all right," she lied, peering at the sterile walls around her. "Just needed to figure some things out. It's complicated." Mrs. Gable didn't pry. "Take the time you need. We'll keep your spot open. Remember to breathe and take care of yourself. Don't get lost in that big city machine." Melanie's chest constricted at the truth behind those words. She thanked her boss and hung up, returning to a thick folder of project briefs. The swirl of guilt and excitement inside her felt overwhelming, but she had little time to dwell on it, because her day was booked solid. 2 meetings, a lunch discussion with Sarah, and an introduction to the finance team. The pace was dizzying. At mid-morning, she encountered Chloe by coincidence in the main lobby, wearing her barista uniform. Chloe was pushing a catering cart stacked with coffee containers. "Mel!" Chloe exclaimed, eyes wide. "What are you doing here?" "I got a gig delivering coffee for a corporate breakfast. Wait, are you wearing—" Her gaze flicked to Melanie's ID badge. Melanie rushed forward, pressing a finger to her lips. "Long story," she whispered. "Keep your voice down." Chloe's expression burst with confusion, then amusement. "Wait, are you working here? You practically vanished from the cafe routine. I was worried." "It's complicated," Melanie repeated. "I'll explain later. It's something I stumbled into." She couldn't meet Chloe's eyes, worried they'd reflect disapproval or curiosity she couldn't satisfy yet. Before they could talk further, a figure cleared his throat from behind them. Marcus Thorne stood there, glancing between them with thinly veiled suspicion. "Dr. Sharma, we're waiting for you in the strategy room," he said, his tone clipped. His gaze lingered on Chloe's coffee cart and then flicked back to Melanie. She sensed he was mentally cataloguing every detail, searching for anomalies. "Right, sorry," Melanie replied, offering Chloe a quick, tight smile before following Marcus. As they headed down the hall, Marcus kept pace beside her, leaning in to speak quietly. "I didn't realize you had acquaintances on the building's catering staff. How interesting. I suppose your background is broader than I assumed." The insinuation was subtle but stung. Melanie forced a neutral expression. "A friend of mine just happens to work for a local cafe that sometimes does corporate deliveries. That's all." Marcus pursed his lips. I see." They arrived at the strategy room, where a group of mid-level managers waited to discuss marketing frameworks. Jacob wasn't present this time, so Marcus took the lead. He introduced Melanie with a restrained politeness, prompting her to share ideas. She noticed every so often how he studied her like a cat watching a mouse. Yet she continued employing her best tactic, using simple, relatable anecdotes that drew on her observations of how people behaved in day-to-day scenarios. The session ended with a lukewarm sense of progress, and Marcus disappeared soon after. She exhaled, feeling as though she'd stepped out of a pressure cooker. Sarah, who had joined by video call, messaged Melanie a quick compliment. Loved your angle on product storytelling. Don't mind Marcus, he's always cautious. Despite Sarah's reassurance, Melanie couldn't shake the suspicion that Marcus might be her biggest threat. He was the one person who seemed not to buy her expert aura. Maybe it was because he was used to academic credentials, or maybe he simply smelled something off in the whole situation. Either way, he loomed as an obstacle she couldn't ignore. A surprise came that afternoon when Jacob called Melanie into his office for a brief check-in. He sat behind his desk, eyes tired but warm as he greeted her. "Everything okay so far? You've been thrown into the deep end." Melanie mustered a wry smile. "I'm managing. Sarah's been helpful, and I've been trying to adapt quickly." She hesitated, recalling Mrs. Gable's advice about not getting lost. Yet she couldn't deny a flicker of pride in herself for surviving these demanding corporate routines. It's challenging but exciting to see how a big corporation operates behind the scenes. Jacob nodded. "I'm glad. We need more fresh perspectives around here. Marcus might be a little guarded, but once he sees results, he'll come around." He paused, tapping a pen on his desk. "Don't let him intimidate you. If he pushes too hard, talk to me." She felt an unexpected gratitude. Having someone in her corner, even if based on false pretenses, alleviated some of her anxiety. "Thank you," she said softly. Jacob continued, "We'll finalize details soon on that new consumer insights project. You'll be working closely with a few teams, so expect more late nights. If you need anything, resources, references, just ask." Melanie nodded, torn between relief at his support and guilt at deceiving him. She recognized a hint of mentorship in his concern, even if it was built on a mistaken identity. Jacob, for all his high-powered aura, was placing his faith in her, and that knowledge kept her forging ahead, weaving new lies each day to keep her place. As she left his office, she spotted Marcus on the far side of the corridor, watching with narrowed eyes. She clutched her notebook tighter. In her heart, she knew she couldn't maintain this charade forever, but for now, she would absorb what she could, growing through the guidance of an unlikely mentor and carefully sidestepping a watchful enemy who seemed all too keen on exposing her secret. The next few days blurred into a whirlwind of brainstorming sessions, corporate meet and greets, and late-night reading for Melanie. Each morning, she slipped into the imposing skyscraper with her carefully prepared notes, determined to keep up appearances. Rather than being frozen by fear, she channeled her nerves into intense curiosity about this new, special world she inhabited. She discovered that Howard Innovations prided itself on fostering creativity. There was a creative lab on the 40th floor where teams gathered to design and test prototypes. She first set foot in the lab late one afternoon, following an invitation from Sarah. Colored post-it notes cluttered the walls, and whiteboards bore half-sketched diagrams. Staff members lounged on beanbag chairs or perched on high stools, tossing ideas back and forth without the usual corporate stiffness. It was a stark contrast to the rigid boardroom environment. A young software engineer, Kyle, greeted Melanie eagerly. "So you're Dr. Sharma. I heard you're bringing a more human angle to how we conceive user experiences. That's awesome. Sometimes we get stuck in code and forget real humans use our stuff." Melanie, though still awkward with the Dr. Sharma label, felt a flush of appreciation. "I'm trying to remind everyone of the emotional resonance behind products. Technology is powerful, but it has to connect with everyday life or it won't last." Kyle grinned. "Exactly. We're working on a prototype for a wearable device that tracks both productivity and well-being. People track steps and calories, but we want to measure emotional health too. Problem is, how do we interpret that data without sounding like we're invading privacy?" Sarah chimed in. "We keep discussing the ethical considerations. Maybe you can help us think it through from a narrative standpoint." How do we convey empathy so users feel supported, not surveilled? Melanie's heart thumped. She wasn't an expert in data ethics, but she did understand people's fear of being watched too closely. Stories that highlight real-life scenarios might help, she offered carefully. For instance, if a user's device notices they're stressed, it could suggest gentle breaks or uplifting content, but it needs to be framed as a friendly companion, not Big Brother. Maybe show how a young mother juggling childcare and work found relief in a daily mindfulness prompt. That personal story could replace clinical jargon. A spark of excitement danced in Kyle's eyes, and he started scribbling on a whiteboard. Yes, that's great! We could produce short, user-centric vignettes, or we could do mini documentaries on early adopters' experiences. Sarah leaned in. We need to get Marcus Thorne's buy-in, though he's big on data but suspicious of soft angles. Might need some quantifiable benefit, like less employee burnout equals reduced costs. Melanie cringed at the mention of Marcus. We'll figure out how to balance both, she said. Numbers show the impact. Stories capture the heart. The energy in the creative lab invigorated her. She found that referencing real human emotions and day-to-day struggles, insights gleaned from watching countless customers at pedal pushers, resonated with the innovative crowd. She contributed small but genuine ideas, drawing parallels between how people choose flowers based on sentiment, memory, or mood, and how they might engage with advanced tech. Observing these bright engineers and designers, she sensed that her biggest hurdle wasn't them. It was sustaining her charade and avoiding suspicious gatekeepers like Marcus. Later that evening, Jacob dropped by the creative lab unannounced, as was apparently his habit. His presence commanded respectful attention without a word. Spotting Melanie, he strolled over, his posture relaxed, but his eyes alight with curiosity. How's our star analyst finding the lab? Melanie felt a wave of warmth. It's amazing. The environment is so open-minded. You've cultivated a space where people aren't afraid to experiment or fail. It's refreshing. He nodded. We needed a shift away from the stiff corporate traditions. This is where breakthroughs happen. He placed a hand casually on the back of a chair, glancing around at the bright scribbles on the walls. I'm thrilled you're blending your perspective into the process. If we can marry rigorous data with genuine human empathy, we'll stand out in a competitive market. Melanie exhaled, heartsick at the deception. She was helping, sure, but she was still an imposter, no official credentials, no years of research experience. Yet, for perhaps the first time in her life, she sensed she was using her natural gifts in a fulfilling way. She was forced to ask herself if that truly required a PhD or the title of doctor. Couldn't her empathy and observational instincts alone be enough? A hint of pride glimmered in Jacob's smile. I'll see you tomorrow at the marketing review. Keep me posted if you need anything. He pivoted to speak to Kyle about technical specs, leaving Melanie standing there, a complex swirl of guilt and gratification tightening her chest. As the night wore on, she helped the team refine narratives for the wearable device concept. Outside the glass walls of the skyscraper, the city glowed with countless lights. She eventually caught a ride on a near-empty elevator, feeling exhaustion in her bones, but also a spark of excitement she couldn't deny. In the cab ride back to her modest Brooklyn apartment, she gazed at the reflection of neon signs dancing on the car window. This special world of corporate innovation felt like an alternate reality where her voice mattered, where her empathy and interest in people's stories wasn't dismissed as whimsical. And ironically, it only opened to her because of a mistaken identity. She knew every day increased the odds of discovery. The real Dr. Sharma could arrive, or Marcus could expose her. Yet she also saw how her authenticity regarding human stories, if not her credentials, made a difference. The tension weighed heavily on her. Still, as she climbed the worn steps to her apartment, she resolved to continue doing her best for the project and the people who counted on her insights. Perhaps that alone might justify her presence, at least for a little while longer. By week's end, Melanie found herself juggling half a dozen tasks. She helped refine user story scripts for the wearable device concept, wrote up bullet points for a marketing presentation, and fielded questions from curious team members who wanted the Dr. Sharma perspective. It was surreal, yet oddly satisfying. She felt almost like an undercover agent, except her mission was simply to avoid detection long enough to contribute something meaningful. During a busy lunch hour, Sarah convinced Melanie to try the urban deli down the block from Howard Innovations. Inside the cozy, modern eatery, they claimed a small table by the window. Sarah, tapping at her phone, recommended the kale and chicken salad. Melanie's stomach rumbled in agreement. "So," Sarah began, pausing to place their order online, "I know you're still settling in, but you've made quite a splash. People across departments keep saying that new hire has such a unique way of framing user experience." Melanie fiddled with a napkin, uneasy about praise built on a lie. Still, she appreciated Sarah's genuine camaraderie. "I'm surprised, honestly. I didn't expect them to value soft observations, but it seems to resonate," Sarah laughed. "Jacob's always been drawn to unconventional thinkers. He's the one who told the hiring team to find someone with fresh eyes, someone who challenges standard corporate practices. That's apparently you." Melanie felt her heart constrict. Jacob's faith in her expertise was what fueled her guilt the most. Changing the topic, she asked Sarah about her own background. Sarah was a marketing graduate from UCLA who moved east to chase opportunities at Howard Innovations. She revealed a passion for bridging Eastern and Western consumer behaviors, hoping one day to lead global campaigns. Midway through the meal, conversation drifted to the upcoming departmental review. Melanie was set to share preliminary user insights, including personal stories that might shape marketing angles. "Jacob wants you there," Sarah said, chewing thoughtfully. "He believes your approach can tip the scales with the senior execs. They want to see whether these big, empathy-driven concepts are worth the investment." Melanie swallowed a sip of iced tea, feeling both excitement and dread. "I'll do my best." She knew it was a moment to shine, or risk raising suspicion if she faltered. After lunch, they walked back to the towering headquarters. At the elevator bank, Marcus Thorne stepped up behind them, greeting Sarah curtly. His eyes swept over Melanie. "Busy day?" he inquired. "Yes," Melanie replied, keeping her tone polite. "We've been discussing user narratives for the new launch." Marcus gave a terse nod. I suppose it's progress. We'll see what the numbers say." Then he faced forward, ignoring them both. The elevator ride felt longer than usual, tension swirling in the cramped space. Later, in Melanie's borrowed office, a knock sounded on the door. She expected Sarah or maybe an assistant with more documents. Instead, David, Jacob's executive assistant, peeked in. With salt and pepper hair and a warm, tired smile, David asked if she had a few minutes. She invited him in, trying not to show the flutter of panic that always surfaced around anyone close to Jacob's inner circle. "I just wanted to check on how you're settling," David said, leaning against the doorframe. "I know Jacob's got big plans for you, and sometimes that can be overwhelming." Melanie exhaled, telling the partial truth. "It's definitely a lot, but I appreciate everyone's support. This project is exciting." David nodded. "Jacob rarely invests this much trust in new hires so quickly. You must have really impressed him with your background." He paused, offering a faint, knowing smile. I took a peek at your official HR file. It's interesting that it has limited info. Some references were missing. Is that a glitch? Or is it because you've been on a research expedition overseas?" Her heart pounded. She remembered Jacob mentioning that the real Dr. Sharma had done field research. She tried to keep her composure. Yes, I was out of reach for a while. Some details might not have transferred properly yet. He shrugged. I'll have HR follow up. Just wanted to give you a heads up. I know how these corporate processes can be. Before turning to leave, he added, Jacob's planning to review the next steps for the wearable device marketing. He said he'd like you in the loop. Expect an invite soon. As David disappeared, Melanie closed her eyes, massaging her temples. Marcus wasn't the only one who might dig deeper. David's responsibilities likely included vetting new talent. She swallowed a surge of worry, reminding herself she had no real exit plan. Not yet. That evening, she worked late with Sarah in a shared conference room, refining slides for the departmental review. They combed through data, weaving in narrative threads about potential users and their daily struggles. Even as Melanie typed, a quiet sense of awe filled her. She was forging real alliances. Sarah's trust, Kyle's respect in the creative lab, Jacob's support. They believed in her ideas, which stemmed not from formal training, but from a lifelong habit of closely observing human joys and aches. She shivered, realizing these alliances were built on an unstable foundation. One revelation of her true identity could collapse the entire structure, but the more she contributed, the more she felt a responsibility to keep going. Perhaps this fragile alliance would hold, at least until she could do something meaningful enough to be worth the eventual fallout. Finally, near midnight, they called it a day. As Melanie packed up, Sarah patted her shoulder. Thanks, Dr. Sharma. Couldn't have done this so smoothly without your angle. Let's stun them tomorrow. Melanie smiled weakly, fighting her conscience. In hours, she'd stand before a room of seasoned executives, championing ideas she believed in wholeheartedly, yet under a name that wasn't hers. She could only hope that her sincerity outshone the lie, for however long she could keep it up. The following morning, Melanie waited outside the large glass-walled conference room on the 52nd floor, her pulse thrumming. The departmental review was minutes away. Through the clear wall, she could see people shuffling seats and testing the projector. She clutched her note cards and inhaled slowly, trying to steady herself. Sarah appeared beside her, offering a supportive nod. "You've got this," she whispered. "Just be yourself. Your best professional self." She laughed nervously, unaware of how her words cut deeply. Jacob entered, projecting an air of calm leadership, and greeted them with a mild smile. "Good morning. Ready to show them something new?" he asked Melanie. She swallowed, giving a stiff nod. His confidence in her was both a buoy and a weight around her neck. The meeting commenced with standard updates from finance, product testing, and logistics. Finally, Jacob introduced Melanie as the specialist, championing consumer empathy and narrative analysis. She rose, nerves prickling, and stepped to the front, where the projected slides waited. The conference table stretched out before her, faces looking on, some curious and some impatient, and Marcus among them, arms folded tight. "Hello, everyone," she began, trying not to let her voice shake. "We've been exploring how a narrative-driven approach can complement our existing data analytics. By understanding the emotional context behind consumer decisions, we can craft more resonant marketing and product features." She clicked through slides showing a few brief case studies, a young professional juggling wellness goals, a retiree seeking simplicity, a student craving genuine connections. Each was built around short, empathetic stories Melanie had pieced together from real-life observations at pedal pushers or conversations with friends like Chloe. She illustrated how these individuals might react to the hypothetical wearable device's gentle nudges. Her words flowed more easily than she'd anticipated. Though she couldn't quote formal research data at length, she could paint vivid scenarios that humanized the marketing approach. She stressed the importance of trust. If users sense we truly understand their daily frustrations, they'll be open to adopting our technology. They won't feel it's an impersonal gadget, but a supportive companion. She finished by showing a modest chart that Sarah had generated, illustrating potential ROI improvements if user satisfaction and brand loyalty increased. Turning to face the group, she clasped her hands. In essence, we marry empathy with analytics. The numbers measure impact, but genuine human connection sparks it. Silence. For a moment, Melanie worried she had missed the mark. Then Sarah led a small round of applause, followed by a few executives nodding thoughtfully. Jacob's approving glance steadied her frazzled nerves, but she braced for Marcus's reaction. Marcus leaned forward, lacing his fingers. "Interesting," he said slowly. "I won't deny the benefit of a consumer-centric narrative, but is this approach truly scalable for a global corporation? Empathy is intangible. We need robust frameworks to replicate success across regions." Melanie steadied her voice. "Scalability requires consistent brand messaging, yes, but we can adapt narratives to different cultural contexts. The core principle, showing authentic care, remains the same. Each market might have unique stories, but the emotional resonance is universal. Our job is to highlight those local nuances while keeping a unifying thread of empathy." Marcus huffed softly. Yet he didn't press further, and an older executive next to him nodded in agreement. "It's a promising angle," the executive murmured. "Customers are tired of feeling like data points." Jacob allowed a moment of discussion before concluding the segment. "Thank you, Dr. Sharma, for reminding us of the human face behind our strategies. Let's see how we can implement some pilot tests using these narratives." "Great work." A collective shift signaled the end of Melanie's portion. Relief flooded her. She'd navigated the meeting without stumbling into a humiliating reveal. More than that, it felt like a small victory. Her words had truly resonated with at least part of the room. When the meeting concluded, several department heads mingled near the door. Sarah squeezed Melanie's arm, grinning. "That was fantastic. You nailed it." Melanie's cheeks warmed. "Thank you for all your help with the data slides. I couldn't have done this alone." Jacob approached next, leaning in to speak quietly. "Well done. You've given them something to think about. I'd like you to expand these ideas for the next board meeting." His voice held a note of pride, sending a mix of thrill and guilt coursing through Melanie's veins. As he walked away to speak with a colleague, she noticed Marcus lingering just out of earshot, expression guarded. She carefully gathered her materials. For the first time since stepping into Howard Innovations, she experienced a surge of confidence that she could function in this high-pressure environment. The insights she offered truly mattered. Yet she couldn't forget that her entire presence was a facade. David caught her in the hallway afterward. "I've seen a lot of presentations, Dr. Sharma," he said, a hint of genuine admiration in his voice. "That one stood out. Mr. Howard clearly sees potential in you. Keep it up." She thanked him, thinking of how quickly it could all unravel if Dr. Anya Sharma suddenly walked in or if Marcus uncovered too many inconsistencies. Still, she held on to the rush of success from the meeting, promising herself that as long as she was here, she would do everything she could to honor the faith people had placed in her, even if it was misguided. This day, at least, ended on a high note. As she left, the bright Manhattan sunlight reflected off the tower's glass, and for a fleeting moment she wondered if the reflection she glimpsed, poised, purposeful, was a version of herself she could grow into. Lies notwithstanding, maybe this small victory was a step towards something bigger, something she had never imagined possible. Melanie Allen stared at her reflection in the window of the nearly empty 51st floor hallway, the distant glow of city lights behind her. It was late, well past normal working hours, and yet she lingered at Howard Innovations, wrestling with the knowledge that she'd just agreed to lead the most significant presentation of her life. Jacob had called her into his office that morning, revealing that the board of directors wanted a full assessment of consumer behavior and market impact for the upcoming product. The presentation was a week away. She hadn't dared to protest. Instead, she had murmured agreement, her heart pounding as Jacob praised her talent for weaving human-centric narratives into corporate data. Now, though, as she took a moment to breathe, the reality of the task pressed heavily on her. These board members included some of the most influential people in the industry. Failure would mean more than embarrassment. It could jeopardize the entire product launch. And if she stumbled too badly, it might even unravel her carefully maintained disguise. She turned from the window and walked back to the makeshift office she still used. A stack of reports waited on her desk. Multi-page documents detailing product specs, internal user surveys, marketing forecasts, and financial projections. She sighed, flipping through them. Numbers upon numbers, cold, impenetrable data that she'd have to transform into a story, compelling enough for executives who thrived on facts. But she reminded herself, she'd already convinced a few senior staff of the value in emotional narratives. This, she hoped, was just the next step. A light knock startled her. Sarah Chen poked her head in, laptop tucked under one arm. "I brought coffee. Figured you'd still be here," she said, handing over a steaming cup. The nutty aroma made Melanie's stomach growl. She realized she hadn't eaten dinner. "Thank you," Melanie replied. She gratefully sipped, savoring both the warmth and the comforting bitterness. "I'm overwhelmed. There's so much to synthesize." Sarah plopped down in the spare chair. "Jacob told me you'll be presenting to the board. That's huge. He's placing a lot of trust in you." Melanie nodded, swallowing a pang of guilt. "He is," she said softly. "I just hope I can deliver. I'm worried about how they'll react to a more humanistic angle in what is normally a numbers-driven environment. Don't forget, it was your perspective that impressed the senior execs before," Sarah reminded her. "And the board can be even tougher than the standard department heads. But if you lean on both the metrics and the personal stories, you might win them over. We'll have to frame it so it doesn't seem too whimsical." Melanie managed a faint smile. "I'll try. I just want to be certain I'm doing justice to the data as well." Sarah shrugged, refreshing a spreadsheet on her laptop. "We'll help. Jacob wants me, Kyle, and a few others to feed you everything you need. You're not alone in this." Melanie nodded appreciatively. Still, she couldn't help feeling alone in one critical sense. No one else was concealing a stolen identity. She swallowed that thought, pushing it aside. She'd handle that crisis later, hopefully after she'd proven her worth. "Any advice on how to handle the board members? Are there particular personalities or landmines I should know about?" Sarah pursed her lips, tapping at her laptop as she spoke. "Some want big returns. Some care about brand prestige. A couple might be open to philanthropic angles if there's a PR benefit. Also, Marcus Thorne will be there, he always is, but he doesn't have final say. Just keep your guard up, and David might be present too, but more in a supportive capacity." A sudden flutter of panic rose in Melanie's chest at the mention of Marcus. He'd grown slightly more polite, yet remained watchful. She suspected he was quietly gathering information. If she stumbled or contradicted herself in front of the board, he might seize the chance to expose her. And David, with his polite thoroughness, was also a wild card. "I'll be ready," Melanie said, attempting to sound confident, "though I might be holed up here day and night until the meeting." Sarah smiled sympathetically. "At least you'll have decent coffee." She stood, patting Melanie's shoulder. "Seriously, let me know how I can help. I'm excited to see you knock their socks off." Melanie took another sip of her coffee and watched Sarah depart. There were times when she caught herself imagining what might happen if she revealed the truth to someone like Sarah, someone who seemed so genuinely supportive. But each time, fear reminded her that it was too risky. She'd likely lose everything. The only way to make this right, she reasoned, was to excel at the job until she found the right moment to explain. Maybe then Jacob, Sarah, and the rest would see she wasn't just a fraud. She had real insight that mattered. Straightening in her chair, she opened a new document on her laptop. She labeled it Board Presentation Draft and began typing bullet points about the product's emotional resonance, bridging data with real user anecdotes, addressing board concerns about ROI and brand image. Little by little, she converted her jumbled thoughts into a structured outline. Outside the office window, Midtown Manhattan glimmered with late-night energy. She tried to draw inspiration from the city's constant momentum, reminding herself that success could bloom from improbable places. If the board presentation was her biggest challenge, then she would meet it head-on, applying her flair for capturing human stories and her newfound knowledge of the corporate realm. Time slipped by as she worked, shaping sentences and layering in references to user surveys Sarah had compiled. By the time she glanced at the clock, it was nearly midnight. Exhaustion weighed on her limbs, but she felt a glimmer of optimism. She was on the brink of an opportunity to prove her worth, not just to those around her, but to herself. She saved her progress, sighing as she shut down the laptop. Another day done, another day closer to standing in front of the board. Gathering her things, she switched off the lights and stepped into the corridor. As she waited for the elevator, she reminded herself that fear was only natural. She had faced it before, and she'd face it again. With each new test, she grew more determined. Ready or not, she would stand up and show that her insights, even if not drawn from official qualifications, could guide a major corporation towards something innovative and genuine. Jacob Howard pressed the button on the office coffee maker, watching the stream of hot liquid fill 2 paper cups. It was nearly 10 at night, and the floor was mostly deserted. Melanie hovered nearby, arms wrapped around herself in a subconscious display of nerves. They had spent the entire evening rehearsing slides for her upcoming board presentation. With only 2 days left, tension ran high. "Coffee, or do you want tea?" he asked quietly, noticing the tired set of her features. "Coffee, please," she said. "I need the jolt." Jacob handed her a cup. The soft hum of the fluorescent lights underscored how empty the place felt after hours. It was moments like these that made Melanie's heart pound. Private slices of time with Jacob, away from the watchful eyes of co-workers. She admired the calm confidence he exuded, a steadiness that assured her if something went wrong, he'd be there to catch her, or at least help pick up the pieces. They returned to the long conference table they had commandeered as a makeshift workspace. Laptops, printouts, and scribbled notes lay scattered across it. As Jacob reviewed a bullet point about user engagement, Melanie sipped her coffee, fighting the drowsy heaviness in her eyelids. He glanced up. "You all right? I know this is a lot to juggle." "I'm fine," she lied gently, setting the coffee down, "just trying to make sure I cover every angle. Sometimes I worry I'm missing some crucial piece of data that the board will ask for." Jacob tapped a pen against his notebook. "Data is crucial. But remember, it's not your only weapon. Your ability to humanize those numbers is why I wanted you here. The board sees 1,000 slides full of stats. You bring a fresh perspective." His gaze flicked to her with genuine warmth. "Don't doubt that." A swell of emotion rose in her chest. Each time he expressed confidence in her, it simultaneously comforted and tormented her. Comforted because she craved validation, tormented because she knew she'd spun an elaborate lie. "Thanks," she managed. forcing a small smile. He watched her for a moment, then cleared his throat. "Mind if I ask you something personal?" The question hung in the air, making her pulse quicken. "Sure," she replied, uncertain. "I'm curious. What drew you to this field of analysis? You talk about empathy and human stories in a way that sounds more literary, like someone who loves art or novels." His voice was gentle, but his eyes probed for an honest answer. Her heart raced. This was exactly the kind of question that could expose her. Carefully, she replied, "Well, I do love literature. I used to spend hours reading and observing people. In a way, that's how I understand behavior, through stories, not just raw figures." She took another sip of coffee, hoping that if she kept the answer vague, he wouldn't push for details that contradicted Dr. Sharma's supposed background. Jacob nodded. "It shows. Corporate environments can dull that sense of narrative. Your input keeps us grounded." He paused, glancing at the documents. "I'm glad you joined us, even if it was a bit unorthodox how things started." She stiffened, recalling the day he mistook her for Anya Sharma. That unorthodox start was an understatement. "Me too," she said quietly, wishing she could be free of the lie and still remain part of this. But how could that ever happen? They resumed reviewing the slides in a companionable silence. Every so often, they'd debate the best phrasing for a graph or discuss how to pivot if a board member questioned the budget. Time drifted, the overhead lights humming softly. Eventually, they took another break, leaning back in their chairs, exhaustion etched across their faces. Jacob loosened his tie and rubbed the back of his neck. "I forget sometimes what it's like to work without pausing for air, but when I'm inspired, I get tunnel vision." Melanie nodded. "I do that too, with writing. I'll get immersed in a world and forget to stop." He gave her a curious look. "Have you written anything I might have read?" Panic flickered, but she kept her expression neutral. "I doubt it. Mostly private or unpublished pieces," she murmured. It wasn't a lie. She'd composed numerous short stories over the years, none of which had ever seen a public audience. "My writing is more for my own mind." Jacob looked as though he wanted to know more, but let it go. "Well," he said, glancing around the deserted floor, "we should wrap soon. The cleaning crew will wonder why two workaholics are burning the midnight oil. Besides, you need rest if you're going to impress those board members." She nodded, though a part of her didn't want the night to end, didn't want to step away from this oddly intimate bubble they'd created amid spreadsheets and coffee cups. Still, she helped him gather materials into neat piles. Before they parted ways, he hesitated, then said, "Melanie," using her first name for perhaps the first time, without the formality of Dr. Sharma. The sound of it sent a tingle down her spine. "If you ever need a break, or just to talk, you can knock on my door any time. I know the pressure can be heavy." Her throat felt tight as she met his gaze. "Thank you. I appreciate that." A million confessions swirled in her mind, but all she managed was a quiet smile. They walked together to the elevator, stepping inside side by side. The city's lights framed them in the reflection on the polished doors. For a moment, neither spoke. The hush between them laced with unspoken possibilities. Then the elevator arrived at the lobby, and reality returned in the form of a bustling security desk and a brisk, cold wind outside. They said goodnight, each heading to their own path. But as Melanie stepped onto the sidewalk, she couldn't shake the warmth of that final moment, nor the guilt that her presence there was based on a tangled lie. Still, she couldn't deny the spark of something genuine between them, something that had little to do with corporate goals and everything to do with human connection. Mid-morning sunlight streamed into Jacob's office as he stood with Melanie near the windows, discussing final tweaks to her presentation slides. The day of the board review was fast approaching, and their conversation carried an undercurrent of urgency. At one point, Jacob paused, reflecting on the strange circumstances that had led to their collaboration. "You know," he mused, sipping from a porcelain mug, "it's funny how these things happen. I keep thinking back to those first 5 minutes of conversation we ever had." Melanie's stomach twisted. She could still remember the shock of him mistaking her for Dr. Sharma that day, orchids balanced precariously in her arms. She forced a gentle laugh. "Yes, it certainly set everything in motion." He nodded, his gaze drifting to the city skyline. "In 5 minutes, you changed my entire perspective on how we approach consumer insight. It wasn't about statistics, it was about empathy." That short conversation reminded me of why I started pushing for innovation in the first place. The sincerity in his voice knifed through Melanie's chest. She recalled the exact wording of the sequence that had turned her world upside down. A humble girl went to deliver a package to the wrong company. A billionaire CEO mistook her for the new employee, and after 5 minutes of conversation, the memory felt both surreal and painfully real, reaffirming how precarious her situation was. Jacob's eyes settled on her, warm and earnest. "Sometimes, I think if you hadn't come that day, I might have continued with the same stale corporate strategies. You reminded me that I used to dream about doing something more meaningful. I wanted you to know that." Her breath caught, and for a moment she struggled to respond. The weight of his admiration was almost unbearable. "I'm glad I could help," she murmured, wincing inwardly. If only he knew the real story. How would he feel then? Betrayal, anger, maybe heartbreak. Before she could dwell on it, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the caller ID and excused himself to answer. Melanie exhaled shakily, letting her eyes roam the office that had become strangely familiar. Sleek, modern furniture, family portraits in muted frames along one shelf, and a small crystal vase of orchids that she had delivered on that fateful day. In truth, she worried that each mention of those 5 minutes was chipping away at her composure. Her lie had grown deeper roots than she'd ever intended. It now formed the foundation of Jacob's renewed passion, the entire company's shift toward more human-driven marketing, and her newly discovered sense of purpose. She toyed with a paperclip on his desk, anxiety churning. She wondered, was she building her future on a fault line? A knock on the open door disrupted her thoughts. David poked his head in, an apologetic look on his face. "Morning, sorry to interrupt. The real Dr. Sharma, Dr. Anya Sharma's HR file, just arrived. She was apparently on some remote expedition. We finally got hold of her. I need to clarify details with you, Jacob, when you have time." Melanie's blood chilled. David had lowered his voice on real Dr. Sharma, but the words rang in her ears like a siren. She kept her face neutral, though her heart thundered. It was happening. The real Anya Sharma had been found. Jacob frowned slightly. "Right. Thanks, David. Let's talk after my call." He cast Melanie a quick glance, perhaps noting her sudden tension. "Is everything okay?" She forced a smile. "Just thinking about the board meeting. I'll step out and refine the notes." Without waiting for a reply, she slipped past David and into the corridor, fighting the sense that her world was about to implode. She replayed David's phrase, "The real Dr. Sharma, we finally got hold of her." That meant the clock on her ruse was ticking fast. She rushed to her temporary office, shutting the door behind her. Leaning against the wall, she shut her eyes, trying to calm her ragged breathing. For weeks, she had known the truth would eventually surface. The genuine Anya Sharma wouldn't stay off the grid forever. But the timing, just days before her biggest professional test, felt catastrophic. She pressed a fist to her chest, grappling with the wave of panic. One part of her mind urged her to come clean right now, face the consequences. Another part insisted on pushing forward. She had promised to deliver this presentation, and maybe, just maybe, she could salvage something before the truth came barreling out. Her phone vibrated, a text from Sarah flashing, "Meeting in 15-min marketing updates." She breathed deeply, forcing herself to straighten and focus. If this was her final moment in the sun, she at least wanted to do her job well. She grabbed a folder of notes and left for the meeting, hoping her face showed none of the inner turmoil. As she hurried down the hall, she caught a reflection of herself in the polished window, a poised woman in business attire. Yet beneath that polished exterior was a trembling figure living on borrowed time. She could already feel the ground shifting under her feet, and the echo of Jacob's words, "Those 5 minutes changed everything," rang in her head like a bittersweet refrain. The day before her board presentation, Melanie found herself in a frenzy of last-minute preparations. She camped in the strategy department's wing, juggling conference calls, replying to urgent emails, and adjusting her slides. Yet no matter how busy she stayed, she couldn't shake the dread triggered by David's casual mention of the real Dr. Sharma. Everything she did now felt weighted with finality, as if each moment might be her last under the guise of Anya Sharma. Late afternoon brought a near-catastrophic crisis. The main data system suffered a glitch, corrupting files with crucial statistics. Engineers scrambled to restore backups, while Sarah and others panicked about missing graphs for the board. When Melanie heard the news, her first impulse was to freeze. But the urgency galvanized her. She rushed to help salvage what they could. Some data sets had to be re-uploaded manually from spreadsheets. Others were lost entirely, forcing them to recreate them from memory and partial notes. Jacob cancelled meetings to join the effort, his brow tight with worry. As the hours ticked by, the entire office seemed to hold its breath, fearing that tomorrow's presentation might be doomed. Finally, around 8 in the evening, the IT team announced they had recovered most of the files. The sense of relief that swept through the halls was palpable. Melanie, still rattled, took a moment to steady herself. She realized Jacob was leaning over a workstation nearby, checking the newly restored data. She approached him, voice soft. "Is it all right? Did we get enough back?" He nodded, exhaling slowly. "We did, thanks to everyone's quick work. That was a close call." Melanie let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "I was worried the entire presentation would fall apart." He looked at her, something vulnerable in his expression. "Me too, but we solved it, and it reminded me how invested we all are in this launch. We can't afford last-minute disasters." "Agreed," she said, forcing a small smile despite her roiling nerves. "I guess we'll continue refining the data tonight. I can stay as long as needed." Jacob reached out, lightly touching her arm in a supportive gesture. "Thank you, but don't exhaust yourself. Big day tomorrow. We need you at your best." His touch was fleeting, but it sent warmth coursing through her. She managed to nod, though her insides quivered. Another brush with vulnerability, another reminder of the closeness growing between them. But no matter how it stirred her heart, she couldn't forget the looming shadow of the real Dr. Sharma's arrival. They returned to the main war room, a large meeting space where staff pored over computers and shared updates. Melanie and Jacob sat side by side, double-checking the slides. At one point, she hovered the cursor over a bullet about brand image. "I'm thinking of shifting this so it follows the user stories," she suggested. "That way, the narrative flows directly into the ROI metrics." Jacob nodded. "Yes, do it. That feels more cohesive." He gave her a brief, proud smile. "You have a knack for tying everything together." The fleeting moment of triumph filled her with conflicting emotions. She was about to lead a high-stakes presentation using a skill set she'd honed through years of watching people, not through any advanced academic training. Yet here she was, shaping corporate strategy at the side of a CEO who believed in her wholeheartedly. If only the lies would vanish. Around 11 o'clock, David popped in to say goodnight, praising their progress. Melanie braced, waiting for him to mention the real doctor. Sharma again, but he simply left, seeming in a rush. She wondered if the meeting with HR had been delayed or if he'd discovered new information. Her mind spun with paranoia. At midnight, the office cleared out except for a few dedicated staff. Melanie and Jacob were reviewing final details when David reappeared, eyes bleary. "Hey," he said quietly. "Marcus just texted me. He's returning to the office. He wants to check some final details about tomorrow." Jacob frowned. "Now, it's after midnight." David shrugged. "You know him. He won't rest until he's confident." Melanie stiffened. Marcus's late-night arrival could only mean he was sniffing around for weaknesses, and possibly for more clues about her identity. Sure enough, at midnight, Marcus strode into the war room, scanning the scene with cool assessment. "Burning the midnight oil," he remarked, setting down his briefcase. "I'd like a quick look at your slides, Doctor. Sharma, if you don't mind, I want to ensure alignment with the financial segment." Melanie swallowed. "Of course," she managed, standing to open the final deck on a large monitor. She stepped through each slide, explaining the human-centric narrative approach. Meanwhile, Marcus drilled her with questions about methodology, references, and footnotes. Though she'd prepared meticulously, she still felt the claws of panic. He seemed determined to find a slip, any sign that she lacked the credentials she claimed. Eventually, he nodded, expression neutral. "All right, it seems consistent enough. I assume you'll handle any tough questions the board might throw about supporting data." "I will," she said, controlling her voice. He arched an eyebrow. "Then we'll see you both in the morning." With that, he left as quickly as he'd arrived. Jacob shot Melanie a concerned glance. "Don't let him rattle you," he said softly. "He's always been demanding, especially before major presentations." She exhaled, slumping into a chair. "He just wants everything perfect." Jacob sighed. "Yes, but sometimes I think it goes beyond that. Just remember, you've proven yourself already." He paused, eyes softening. "Get some rest soon, okay? Big day tomorrow." Melanie forced a nod, her entire body taut with tension. She thanked him and remained in the war room even after he departed, her mind a swirl of what-ifs. If Marcus had found any discrepancy, he'd likely have pounced. But that didn't mean she was safe, only that she dodged him one more time. As she finally shut her laptop, she caught her reflection in the monitor, exhausted eyes, worry etched on her face. She felt like she was stepping into a dead-end alley. The presentation loomed. Marcus was on the prowl, and somewhere out there was Dr. Anya Sharma, a single phone call away from blowing this wide open. Tomorrow might well decide her fate, whether she liked it or not. A crisp morning breeze greeted Melanie as she stepped off the subway in Midtown. She clutched her laptop bag tightly, her nerves on high alert. This was it, the day of the board presentation. She'd barely slept, haunted by visions of standing at the podium and forgetting every word, or worse, being called out as an imposter before she could even begin. She arrived at Howard Innovations earlier than usual, slipping through the lobby amid a crowd of equally tense-looking employees. Word had spread that today's board meeting was crucial. The future of the new product hinged on the decisions made at this gathering. Melanie took a quick detour to the bathroom, double-checking her appearance. Tidy blouse, neat slacks, hair pinned up. She practiced a calm, confident expression in the mirror, ignoring the frantic pounding in her chest. By 8:30, she found herself backstage in the executive auditorium, a space rarely used except for major announcements or high-profile presentations. Plush seats filled the auditorium, and the stage area featured a sleek wooden lectern with a large screen behind it. Melanie hovered near the curtain, glancing through a gap at the board members filtering in. Some she recognized from quick introductions, others were older, distinguished individuals she'd only seen in passing. David and Sarah bustled around, finalizing technical details and passing out printouts. Jacob stood to the side, conversing quietly with a pair of executives. Marcus was there too, scanning the room with laser focus. The real Dr. Sharma was nowhere to be seen, but that did little to calm Melanie's churning fears. Any second, that phone could ring or that door could open. Jacob approached, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. "How are you holding up?" he asked, voice low. She inhaled shakily. "Nervous, but I'm ready." He offered a reassuring smile. "Trust your instincts. You've got something valuable to share." Moments later, the lights dimmed slightly, signaling the start. An older board member at the front welcomed everyone, then introduced Jacob. He strode on stage with commanding composure, summarizing the product's potential and the significance of empathy-driven consumer insights. And now, I'd like to introduce Dr. Anya Sharma, who's led our innovative approach to understanding consumer needs from a human perspective, he concluded, stepping aside. Melanie's heart nearly stopped when she heard the name Dr. Anya Sharma. Summoning every ounce of courage, she walked out under the stage lights, a sea of watchful eyes fixed on her. The podium felt both comforting and terrifying, a barrier and a spotlight all in one. She inhaled, steadying herself. "Good morning," she began, voice echoing slightly. "I'm here to share how we've integrated empathy and narrative analysis into our consumer strategy. While raw data provides the where and when, we believe understanding the why is key to forging real loyalty." She advanced the first slide, discussing the user stories. Her voice grew steadier as she described an imagined day in the life of a young professional using their wearable device for emotional well-being checks. She explained how the data sets correlated with real-time stress levels, but more importantly, how the device's prompts sought to connect, not just monitor. A few board members leaned forward, intrigued. Others scribbled notes. Marcus watched from the sidelines, arms folded, yet so far no one questioned her credibility. Encouraged, she pressed on, revealing the recompiled statistics that Sarah had helped restore. She highlighted potential ROI, brand loyalty metrics, and how an emotionally supportive brand image could differentiate them in a crowded market. Ultimately, she concluded, these narratives and the supporting data show that users want to feel seen and supported. By humanizing our technology, we position Howard Innovations as a company that respects the complexity of real life, not just profit margins. Her final slide displayed a short quote from a literary giant, one of her personal favorites, about empathy being the bridge between isolation and community. The auditorium was silent for a heartbeat before applause broke out. Some board members nodded in approval. A couple even smiled. Melanie exhaled, relief washing over her. Jacob joined her on stage, thanking her and opening the floor for questions. Several hands rose. She fielded inquiries about scalability, data security, and cultural adaptations. To her amazement, the words came smoothly, based on nights of research and raw passion for connecting with people. Even Marcus asked a technical question she deftly handled, referencing an internal pilot study. She felt the surge of triumph. She was pulling it off. And for a moment, it almost felt real. Almost until in the corner of her eye, she spotted David stepping backstage, phone pressed to his ear, his expression clouding. Her pulse skipped. Had the real Dr. Sharma finally made contact at the worst possible time? Her thoughts spun, but she forced herself to stay calm as Jacob wrapped up the Q&A. The board members seemed receptive overall, praising the uniqueness of the approach. A wave of relief and pride coursed through her body. She'd done her part. Maybe she'd earned enough credibility that even the truth wouldn't fully destroy the goodwill she'd built. Jacob thanked the attendees, and the meeting ended with quiet excitement. As people filtered out, Melanie stepped off stage. Sarah and a few colleagues offered quick congratulations, but her gaze locked on David, who was pacing with his phone, face taut. She knew it wasn't over. Her successful presentation might become meaningless if the real Anya Sharma appeared to claim her rightful place. Yet for one shining moment, Melanie allowed herself to feel victorious. Whatever happened next, she had proven her worth, at least in the realm of ideas and empathy. She wasn't just an imposter, she told herself. She was a woman who deserved to be heard, and maybe, just maybe, that would matter when the truth came crashing down. Melanie lingered backstage in the executive auditorium long after most board members had filed out, her nerves still buzzing from the presentation. She clung to the faint hope that the crisis she feared would not arrive today. The applause still echoed in her ears, a testament to the success she'd achieved, yet the uneasy twist in her stomach refused to subside. She caught sight of Jacob speaking with a cluster of executives by the double doors, all nodding and offering what seemed like congratulations. Normally, she'd have reveled in the moment. She had just delivered a high-stakes presentation without a hitch. Instead, her pulse hammered with dread at the possibility that any second someone would call out her name. The real Dr. Anya Sharma could appear at any moment. Her phone vibrated. She glanced down to see a text from Sarah. "Hey, everyone's thrilled. Where are you? Let's celebrate." Melanie's heart clenched. Celebrate. She couldn't bring herself to feel joy when her entire identity hung by a thread. Forcing a tight smile, she slipped the phone into her pocket and moved to the side exit leading to a quiet corridor. She just needed a moment to breathe. That was when she noticed David standing near the far wall, phone in hand, anxiety etched across his brow. Her stomach dropped. She hesitated, then took a cautious step forward. He glanced up, caught her eye, and motioned for her to come closer. When she reached him, he ended his call with an unsteady sigh. "Is everything okay?" she asked, bracing herself. David looked torn. "I've been in touch with HR. He paused, glancing around to ensure no one else was within earshot. "We've confirmed the real Dr. Anya Sharma's arrival in New York. She's on her way here. Marcus is already aware." Melanie's breath stalled, chest tight. "Here. Today." She wasn't sure if she'd whispered or if the words had even come out at all. David nodded, sympathy flooding his expression. "Yes, she apparently cleared up some miscommunications. She wants to see Jacob about her new position, which, as far as she knows, she's still intended to fill. I'm sorry, but this is about to become very public. We need to figure out what's going on." A cold sweat broke over Melanie's skin. There was no time left to strategize, no chance to slip away quietly. She felt as though the floor were crumbling beneath her feet. David pressed his lips together. "Jacob should hear it from you," he said softly. "Better he learns this truth from the person he's grown to trust than from a complete stranger." Her heart pounded. The person he'd grown to trust, the same person who'd deceived him from day one. She swallowed back a wave of nausea and nodded. I'll find him," she managed, voice trembling. Without another word, David stepped aside, letting her pass. She gathered every shred of courage and walked down the hallway, scanning for any sign of Jacob. She found him in a side lounge, finishing a conversation with two board members who promptly congratulated him once more. When they departed, Melanie approached, her mind spinning. If she was going to come clean, it had to be now. "Jacob," she said quietly. Her throat felt unbearably tight. "There's something I—" Before she could finish, the door at the far end of the lounge swung open. A poised woman in a tailored grey blazer stepped inside, clutching a leather portfolio. She had dark, wavy hair and a resolute expression, as though she were bracing for a confrontation. Her gaze flickered between Melanie and Jacob. "Mr. Howard," the woman asked, stepping forward, "I'm Dr. Anya Sharma. I realize there's been some confusion, but I've finally made it here to discuss the position we spoke about." Shock rippled over Jacob's features. He looked from the newcomer to Melanie, mind clearly racing. "Wait!" He froze, words halting. "What's going on?" Melanie swallowed painfully, tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. She risked a look at Dr. Sharma, who stood tall and confident. There it was, the moment she dreaded. Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. "Jacob, I can explain. I'm not Dr. Sharma. I never was." Her entire body shook with the confession, tears hovering on her lashes. A raw moment of silence followed. Jacob's gaze hardened, betrayal etched into his eyes. "What do you mean?" he asked, his tone controlled, but shaking beneath the surface. Melanie mustered the courage to continue. "I'm just Melanie Allen, a flower shop delivery girl. I came to drop off orchids the day we met. You assumed I was Dr. Sharma, and I tried to correct you at first, but I got swept up. Then everything happened so quickly, and I didn't have the courage to tell you, and then Enough." Jacob's voice came out quieter than she expected, but the hurt in it was unmistakable. The new arrival, the real Dr. Sharma, looked on in stunned confusion. Marcus burst into the lounge next, as though summoned by the tension. He must have sensed what was unfolding. His narrowed gaze flicked between them, then settled on Melanie. "So," he said flatly, "it's true. I suspected something was off." Jacob ignored Marcus, his eyes locked on Melanie. She reached out a trembling hand, but he stepped back, the distance between them palpable. "You lied to me, to the entire company," he said, voice trembling in anger. "All those meetings, the board presentation, everything. How could you do this?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I didn't mean to deceive you. I wanted to tell the truth so many times, but it got too big. I never wanted to hurt anyone." All the tension from the last weeks, her hopes, her guilt, her desperation, collapsed into a crushing moment of reality. Jacob shook his head, looking as though the ground beneath him had vanished. Marcus, stepping forward, addressed him in a carefully measured tone. "She's committed a severe breach of trust. We can't let this go unaddressed. Not with the board expecting Dr. Sharma's credentials for our project." "Dr." Sharma stood quietly, absorbing the scene with widened eyes, while Jacob visibly struggled between shock and anger. Finally, his voice broke the hush. "Melanie, if that's your real name, you need to leave. Immediately." Each syllable cut like glass. She felt her heart shatter at his words. There was no space for explanation, no place to beg forgiveness. With tears blurring her vision, she turned and stumbled out of the lounge, ignoring the stares of staff in the corridor. The plush carpeting felt like quicksand under her feet as she fled toward the exit, the humiliating whispers and gaping looks snapping at her like hungry wolves. When she finally emerged onto the Manhattan sidewalk, she let out a broken sob. Everything she'd built, every moment of validation, every glimpse of possibility had dissolved in one agonizing instant. The finality settled over her, suffocating and absolute. She had no idea where she was going, only that she wanted to vanish from the place where her dreams and deceptions had collided so spectacularly. Melanie Allen spent the next week in a haze, barely leaving her tiny Brooklyn apartment. After fleeing Howard Innovations in tears, she'd made it home on sheer autopilot, discarding her corporate attire in a heap on the floor and crawling into bed. Every time she closed her eyes, she replayed the moment Jacob's gaze filled with betrayal, the numbness in his voice as he ordered her out. She quit Petal Pushers via voicemail the very next morning, too ashamed to face Mrs. Gable or her co-workers. She hadn't even bothered to collect her final paycheck in person. In her mind, she deserved to vanish. She seldom ate, ignoring calls from Chloe. The only sign of life in her apartment was the occasional shuffle to the kitchen for water, or the slow, restless pacing around her cramped living room. On the 6th day, a firm knock startled her. She froze, heart pounding. Another knock, followed by a muffled voice. "Mel, I know you're in there. Open the door." Chloe. The pink-haired barista turned friend. Melanie grimaced, uncertain if she could handle conversation, but something in Chloe's tone felt determined. Slowly, she unlatched the door. Chloe strode in, a to-go coffee cup in each hand. "You look like a ghost," she blurted. "Seriously, when was the last time you slept or ate a decent meal?" Without waiting for an answer, Chloe placed the coffees on the small table by the couch and turned to scan the apartment. Take-out boxes, unopened mail, and a forlorn orchid petal or two from the day she'd brought them home lay scattered around. The scene screamed despair. Melanie lowered her eyes, unable to summon even mild indignation. She was too drained. I messed up everything," she said, voice shaking. "You don't understand what I did." Chloe tucked a stray pink strand behind her ear. "Well, I've heard bits and pieces. The rumor is you posed as some fancy consultant and got found out. Care to fill me in on the details?" Her tone was gentle but firm. A lump formed in Melanie's throat as she recounted the entire story. How Jacob mistook her for Dr. Sharma. How she'd tried to explain but got swept into a tidal wave of corporate chaos. How she discovered her knack for reading people had real value, right up until the real Dr. Sharma appeared. Chloe listened, eyes widening at intervals, mouth tightening at others, but she never interrupted. At the end, Melanie wiped a tear. "I've never felt so worthless. Jacob hates me. The whole company hates me. I can't show my face at Petal Pushers either. I'm a liar, a fraud. I couldn't stop. I just kept going day after day." Chloe settled onto the couch, handing Melanie one of the coffee cups. "It's not okay what you did," she said softly, "but that doesn't make you worthless. You had reasons, maybe not good ones, but reasons. And you found a part of yourself you never knew was there, someone who can think outside the box and communicate with empathy. That's real." Melanie stared at the steam rising from the coffee. "That part is gone, though. It doesn't matter." Chloe scoffed. "Stop it. You learned you have real insights, even if your method of getting there was twisted. Look, you can't hide forever. You said you wanted to do something meaningful with your knack for reading people, so do it. Apologize if you need to, make amends if you can, but don't surrender your entire life." A taut silence stretched. Melanie's eyes burned from unshed tears. "I don't know how to face the world. I cost them all, Jacob, the team's time, trust. They invested in me, and I just lied." Chloe's expression softened. "People have come back from worse. The question is, do you want to give up for good, or do you want to figure out who Melanie Allen really is?" Something about those words broke through the numbness. After Chloe left, Melanie dragged herself into the shower, scrubbing away days of inertia. She stared at her reflection in the foggy mirror afterward, hair damp, eyes puffy. Who is Melanie Allen? A question she'd avoided for years. She used to deliver flowers, hide behind books, and dream of writing stories she never shared. A few more days passed in slow introspection. She ignored calls from unknown numbers, half fearing it might be someone from Howard Innovations. One afternoon, Mrs. Gable appeared unexpectedly, letting herself into the apartment with a spare key Chloe had borrowed. Melanie found the older woman rummaging in her kitchen, preparing a pot of tea. Seeing her boss's familiar, gentle face unleashed a fresh wave of tears. "Mrs. Gable," she croaked, "I'm so sorry. I abandoned the shop. I let you down." "Now, child," Mrs. Gable murmured, clasping Melanie's trembling hands, "you don't need to apologize to me. I just want to know if you're safe. Chloe told me bits about your trouble at that big company. Whatever happened, I know you're not a bad person." Melanie sobbed, burying her face in Mrs. Gable's shoulder. In that moment, she realized she still had some measure of support, people who cared about her even without the fancy job or illusions. Over cups of tea, she tentatively asked Mrs. Gable for advice on her next steps. The older woman suggested Melanie reconnect with her love for literature, maybe volunteering somewhere that fosters reading or writing to channel her gift for empathy more constructively. "You always had the most curious mind," Mrs. Gable said fondly. "Use it to help others. Don't lock yourself away." With that nudge, Melanie began searching for volunteer opportunities. She discovered the Read More initiative, a library-driven program that focused on community outreach. It turned out that Howard Innovations had once been listed as a silent sponsor, though she figured they'd never welcome her there if they recognized her name. Still, she was desperate for any chance to re-engage with the world. On a Tuesday morning, she mustered the courage to apply for a volunteer position at a local library branch affiliated with Read More. She showed up, hands shaking, and introduced herself simply as Melanie Allen, no doctor, no false pretenses. The coordinator, Mrs. Miles, welcomed her warmly, relieved for extra help cataloging books, reading to kids, and assisting with literacy programs. As Melanie shelved tattered paperbacks and greeted visiting patrons, she felt a faint spark reignite. She had always cherished books for their power to bridge gaps between people. If she couldn't be a corporate analyst, she could at least help the community discover the magic of literature. Little by little, she sensed the first traces of an inner strength returning, an inkling that her life wasn't over. She still had value, even if she wasn't who she'd pretended to be. 2 weeks later, on a breezy Saturday afternoon, Melanie arrived at the small neighborhood library to assist with a children's reading event. Brightly colored posters decorated the entrance, advertising story time for local families. She set out little plastic chairs in a semicircle and helped arrange stacks of picture books on a low table. She'd adapted to volunteer life with surprising ease. On quiet weekdays, she sorted books by genre or read aloud to kids who needed after-school tutoring. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt honest. Here, there was no place for imposters, just individuals sharing knowledge and compassion. Part of her ached to remain invisible, and yet she found solace each time a child's face lit up when discovering a new story. Mid-event, she finished reading a picture book to a group of wide-eyed 5-year-olds. The parents clapped politely. Melanie took a small bow, heart warmed by the simple validation. She noticed Mrs. Miles, the program coordinator, waving at her from across the room. By her side stood a tall figure in a dark coat, partially obscured by a display rack of children's classics. Melanie frowned, gently excused herself from the circle, and approached. The figure turned, and her entire body froze in shock. Jacob Howard. His intense blue eyes met hers, betraying a flurry of emotions. Surprise, anger, or maybe something else. She couldn't tell which. Her breath caught in her throat as her mind raced. She hadn't told him where she was volunteering, hadn't expected ever to see him again, yet here he was, in the last place she'd imagined. Mrs. Miles introduced them, oblivious to the tension crackling between them. Melanie, This is Mr. Howard, one of the benefactors who's been assisting our library fund. He wanted a quick tour of our new programs. Melanie swallowed hard. "Hello," she said, voice barely above a whisper. Her heart drummed so loudly she feared everyone could hear it. Jacob cleared his throat, nodding stiffly at Mrs. Miles. "Yes, I've supported Readmore for a while, though anonymously. I'm interested in seeing how these programs are expanding." He paused, gaze flickering over Melanie. "I didn't expect to run into an old colleague." The last word hung in the air. Melanie flushed, uncertain how to respond. Mrs. Miles, sensing awkwardness, politely excused herself to speak with another volunteer. Suddenly, Melanie and Jacob stood alone among the bustling children's section, with cartoon posters and cheerful reading nooks as their backdrop. She folded her arms around herself, pulse roaring. "Jacob!" she managed, eyes cast downward. I'm sorry." "For everything." He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling heavily. "I didn't come here to rehash what happened," he said, his voice subdued. "I only found out from Sarah that you'd been volunteering at a library. I didn't realize it was one funded by Howard Innovations until she mentioned a Melanie Allen on the volunteer roster. I had to see for myself." Her cheeks burned. "So you came to confirm I'm not lying about this too?" He sighed, sliding his hands into his coat pockets. "Honestly, I'm not sure why I came. Part of me was furious. I felt humiliated, betrayed. Another part of me wondered if you were okay. And seeing you here..." He trailed off, letting his gaze drift to a group of kids poring over a stack of books. "It makes sense. You always talked about empathy, about understanding people's stories. Maybe this is where you belong." Tears prickled in her eyes. "I never wanted to hurt anyone," she said brokenly. "I lied, yes, but I cared so much about the work, about the people. It wasn't a game to me." Jacob's expression softened, though shadows of hurt lingered. "Do you have any idea how awful it felt, finding out I'd trusted you, confided in you, only to discover none of it was real?" She flinched. "It was real," she whispered, voice tight with emotion. "Every conversation, every idea, I gave it my all, I swear." They stood there, words unspoken swirling between them. Around them, children giggled, oblivious to the tension. Finally, Jacob nodded toward an empty reading alcove. "Is there somewhere we can talk privately?" Melanie led him to a quiet corner behind a row of tall bookshelves. The air felt charged. She braced herself for another onslaught of anger, but to her surprise, Jacob's voice quivered with something closer to sorrow than rage. "I was so angry," he admitted, "but I can't forget the real contributions you made. The board was impressed, and we've implemented some of your suggestions. The product is moving forward, even Dr. Sharma recognized that some of our best consumer insights came from your approach. She's working with the marketing team now." Melanie's chest tightened at the mention of Dr. Sharma. She glanced down. "I'm glad it helped, at least." His stare burned into her. "Why didn't you just tell me the truth from the start, even if it was awkward? Why keep it going?" She shuddered, blinking away tears. "I tried. That first day, you barely gave me a chance to speak. And after a while, I felt like I'd found my purpose. No one had ever taken me seriously. You saw something in me I didn't see in myself. I was terrified I'd lose that if you knew the truth." He studied her, turmoil evident in his features. Then he exhaled. "Well, you found your purpose, but at a terrible cost. You betrayed trust." A pause. "But you also saved our launch with your insights. I can't ignore that." A trickle of hope mingled with her shame. "And thank you for not dismissing the good." Jacob glanced at the library shelves, overflowing with stories of mistakes, redemption, and transformation. "Look, I'm not ready to just forgive and forget. But seeing you here, volunteering, reminds me of the kind of empathy I once admired in you. If we can talk, really talk, maybe we can find some closure." His voice wavered, as if uncertain whether he truly wanted closure or something deeper. She nodded, tears threatening to spill. "I'm here whenever you're ready," she said quietly. "I owe you that and more." He lingered, eyes reflecting a mix of emotions, relief, confusion, longing, then gave a slight nod. As he turned to go, he added, "The Read More initiative is expanding soon. We're hosting a community event next month. Maybe I'll see you there." It was neither a promise nor a threat, but a door left ajar. In the silence that followed his departure, Melanie slid to the floor, back against the shelves. Her hands trembled, heart pounding. The emotional climax she dreaded had arrived, yet it wasn't a clean break. It felt more like a fragile beginning. She pressed a hand to her chest, inhaling the comforting scent of old paper and ink. Somewhere amid these dusty pages, perhaps her next chapter waited to be written, one she would fill with nothing but the truth. Melanie paced the length of her apartment, heart pounding. She was expecting Jacob in less than an hour. For weeks since their tense encounter at the library, they'd exchanged a handful of cautious messages. Nothing deeply personal, but enough to keep a line of communication open. Now he was coming by in person to discuss a potential collaboration, as he'd put it on the phone. The mix of trepidation and hope nearly overwhelmed her. She tidied the small living room, stashing away leftover book donations and volunteering schedules in a neat pile on her coffee table. She'd even placed a tiny vase of fresh daisies, bought from a corner stand to replace the wilted orchids she could no longer bear to look at. Her reflection in the mirror revealed anxious eyes and a nervous twist to her mouth. A sharp rap on the door snapped her to attention. She opened it to find Jacob standing there, wearing a casual jacket instead of his usual tailored suit. He looked a bit out of place in her modest hallway, but his expression was calm, if wary. She stepped aside, allowing him in. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. She'd rehearsed a formal greeting, but it melted the instant she saw him. The memory of that first day, him calling her doctor, Sharma by mistake, echoed in her mind, a sharp reminder of all that had happened. He nodded, gaze flicking around the room. "It's nice, cozy," he commented. He paused by the small bookshelf, scanning the titles, classics, modern novels, even a few writing craft guides. She offered a tentative smile. "I read a lot." In another life, she might have admitted she wrote too, but exposing any part of herself felt complicated right now. Jacob cleared his throat. "Look, let's sit." He gestured toward the worn couch. Melanie perched on the edge, hands clasped to still her shaking fingers. He settled beside her, but left a polite distance between them. After a beat of awkward silence, he began, "I talked to Dr. Sharma about the product's philanthropic angle. She's focusing on the technical analytics, but we also want to expand the user outreach portion. The company has a philanthropic project, one you stumbled upon at the library." Melanie nodded, recalling how she'd learned that Howard Innovations secretly funded multiple reading and community initiatives. "I volunteer at the library branch." "Yeah." Jacob leaned forward. "We want to formalize a partnership with local libraries, especially for youth literacy and tech literacy integration. We need someone who understands the spirit of community engagement, but can also translate corporate goals into real benefits. Someone with empathy, communication skills, and the ability to connect with everyday people. I thought maybe you would be interested." She blinked, speechless. Me? Even after everything she'd done? He nodded, voice steady. "Yes. I spoke to Sarah. And even Dr. Sharma is on board, provided we're transparent about your role. It wouldn't be under false pretenses this time. You'd be a consultant for our corporate social responsibility department, focusing on bridging the gap between corporate resources and community needs. Her eyes filled with tears. You trust me enough to let me do that after what happened. She swallowed the lump in her throat. I mean, I'm honored, but I'm also terrified. Jacob exhaled slowly. I won't lie. Part of me is still angry. But I can't ignore your genuine talent for connecting with people. The board presentation, the feedback from staff, it was real. Marcus opposed this idea at first, but we compromised. You wouldn't be a senior analyst or anything. You'd be a consultant on specific social outreach projects. If you accept, we'd do this properly, under your real name and credentials, or lack thereof. Melanie's gaze dropped to her hands. I don't have a fancy degree, Jacob. My resume is basically delivery person and a high school diploma. What if it's not enough for your corporate world? He shook his head. Credentials aren't everything. Look, I've seen your abilities firsthand. Sarah is willing to help. Dr. Sharma will handle the technical side. Your focus would be user engagement at the community level. We think it can be a true win-win. The company invests in reading programs, libraries, and underprivileged communities, and in return, we build goodwill and loyalty. Her mind spun. This offer was everything she'd secretly longed for, a chance to do meaningful work, applying her empathy and communication skills without masquerading as someone else. But fear gripped her. What about you and me? She asked quietly. Is this purely professional? Jacob's eyes flickered with emotion. Right now, I need it to be professional, he answered, not unkindly. I'm not ready to jump back into whatever we were almost starting. I do still feel hurt, but I also see the person beneath the lie. If we work together honestly, maybe in time we can see if there's something to mend. His candor stung, but she appreciated it. She reached for a tissue on the coffee table, dabbing at the tears threatening to fall. I understand, and I accept your offer, she breathed, her voice thick with emotion. I want to make amends. If I can do that by helping the community, then I will. A flicker of relief crossed his features. Thank you, he said. The official paperwork can come later. We'll do it the right way. No illusions, no hidden agendas. She gave a trembling nod. Thank you for giving me a chance. I promise I'll do everything I can to earn your trust. They stood, tension still in the air but tempered by a cautious sense of hope. At the door, he paused. We start planning the official rollout next week. I'll have Sarah coordinate the details. I'm sure you two will collaborate closely. Melanie's heart fluttered. Despite the unresolved feelings between them, she felt a surge of gratitude. She walked him to the hallway. Their eyes met, and a silent understanding passed between them. This was a fragile step toward reconciliation, built on truth this time. As the door closed behind Jacob, Melanie slumped against it, releasing a shuddering breath. Uncertainty still loomed, but the strangling guilt had loosened, replaced by a spark of determination. She wiped her tears and straightened. She had a second chance, a real one, to prove that she was more than a lie. And for the first time since her downfall, she allowed herself to believe it might actually work. Over the following weeks, Melanie's new role as a consultant for Howard Innovation's corporate social responsibility department blossomed in ways she never imagined. She remained based out of her Brooklyn apartment, but regularly visited the company's offices, this time with a legitimate badge reading simply Melanie Allen, CSR consultant. Walking through those sleek glass doors without pretense felt both strange and liberating. Sarah guided her through formal orientation sessions, introducing her to staff who'd only known her as the mysterious Dr. Sharma. Some recognized her face and gave polite, if slightly curious, nods. A few bristled at first. Rumors spread quickly after her abrupt exit, but once they saw she was working under her real identity, forging honest alliances, resistance softened. Bit by bit, the novelty of her story gave way to appreciation for her genuine insight. She split her time between Howard Innovation's headquarters and various library branches, shaping reading programs, technology demos, and creative workshops for underprivileged youth. The synergy fueled her with purpose. Her knack for reading people's unspoken needs now found a practical outlet. She wrote short proposals explaining how high-tech devices could encourage reluctant readers, or how structured storytelling contests might spark new passion among teenage volunteers. At every step, she reminded herself, this time, it's all real. No borrowed credentials, no false persona. She felt an exhilarating sense of authenticity even when tasks got tough. Marcus Thorne kept his distance, but he no longer glared with outright suspicion. Dr. Anya Sharma, surprisingly gracious, acknowledged Melanie's unique viewpoint during a brainstorming session. "This is exactly the angle we needed," she said with a small smile, tapping a page of Melanie's notes. "I handle the metrics, you handle the human factor. It's a productive balance." One late afternoon, Melanie emerged from a meeting with Sarah in the marketing wing. She'd just pitched an idea to organize mini-libraries in underfunded schools, integrating a digital platform sponsored by Howard Innovations. Sarah beamed as they left the conference room. "That was awesome. You even impressed Marcus's team. No small feat." Melanie grinned. "I can't believe how different everything feels now that I'm not hiding. I'm still learning the corporate side, but at least I'm able to be myself." Sarah patted her arm affectionately. "You're doing great, and Jacob seems pleased with your progress." The mention of Jacob made Melanie's heart skip. She nodded, trying to keep her face neutral. Truthfully, while they interacted professionally, weekly status updates, occasional quick check-ins, Jacob maintained a careful boundary. He was courteous, open to her ideas, but personal conversations remained scarce. Whenever she passed his office, she recalled the nights they'd shared brainstorming over coffee. Now, the connection felt like a fragile flower, struggling to regrow in rocky soil. That evening, as she packed up her laptop, an unexpected email popped into her inbox. Project Read More Initiative, Corporate and Community Celebration, Invitation. The message outlined a celebratory event at the main library branch downtown, a place that also housed a children's reading room and an adult literacy program. Howard Innovations planned to announce a major sponsorship, celebrating the success of recent expansions, some of which Melanie had helped shape. She scrolled further and noticed her name on the schedule. She was set to speak briefly about the importance of bridging corporations and communities. Her pulse fluttered, public speaking again, but this time under her real identity. She felt a twinge of fear at stepping behind a microphone once more, yet a stronger sense of excitement. This was redemption on her own terms. A week later, on the day of the event, she arrived at the Grand Library building early. Rows of folding chairs faced a small stage near the main reading room, newly refurbished with bright murals and sleek tables. Large posters displaying Howard Innovations' name and the library's logo stood side by side. Guests filtered in, local officials, librarians, company representatives. She recognized some from the day she was first unmasked. Her nerves tingled. Shortly after opening remarks by Mrs. Miles, the program coordinator, Jacob took the stage. He spoke about the company's commitment to social responsibility in a steady, measured tone. But Melanie could sense a hint of passion beneath his polished exterior. Then he announced, I'd like to introduce Melanie Allen, our CSR consultant who has been instrumental in aligning community needs with our corporate resources. Melanie? He beckoned her to the podium. Heart thrumming, she stepped forward. Unlike her board presentation, she wore no mask of false identity. She gazed at the small crowd, some curious, some politely attentive. She inhaled, recalling the library's gentle hush, the lives she'd touched through reading programs, and the possibility that even small gestures could spark big changes. "Thank you," she began, voice trembling at first but growing stronger. She described how meaningful it was to see technology and literature converge in ways that uplift communities. She spoke candidly about the power of empathy, of listening to real stories from real people. She didn't mention her past deception. There was no need. This moment was about forging the future, not dwelling on mistakes. Applause rose when she concluded. A wave of relief and pride washed over her. Jacob, stepping close, offered a handshake that turned into a gentle squeeze of her hand. Warmth flooded her chest. For a heartbeat, his gaze caught hers, and she read an unspoken message there. "I'm proud of you. We've come a long way." After the speeches, people mingled, exploring the refurbished reading room. Melanie stood near the children's section, scanning the vibrant artwork on the walls. She felt a presence at her side and turned to find Jacob. He wore a soft smile. "You did well," he said quietly. "I remember your first big presentation, how nervous you were. Now I see a confident, genuine voice." She looked down, a flush creeping over her cheeks. "Thank you. It feels surreal, standing here as myself." Jacob nodded, eyes reflecting the library's gentle lamplight. "I know trust can't be rebuilt overnight, but your honesty, your passion, it's showing everyone who you really are." A pause. "And it reminds me of why I was drawn to you in the first place." Tears prickled at the edges of her vision, but they were tears of gratitude and hope. She sensed, in his words, an opening for something more, maybe not yet, but eventually. "I'm truly sorry," she whispered. "I know I say it a lot, but I mean it." "I believe you," he replied, voice almost tender. He glanced around the library, kids and parents talking animatedly about the new reading programs. "And if you're willing, maybe we can try again, slowly, as two people who share a passion for empathy and stories." Her throat felt tight as she nodded. "Yes," she managed, emotion blooming in her chest. Slowly, with no more lies, he slipped his hand into hers, a simple gesture that felt as monumental as any corporate deal she'd ever negotiated. In that moment, the library's bright colors and soft murmurs of activity felt like the perfect backdrop for the new chapter in her life, one rooted in truth, compassion, and the genuine connection she'd craved all along. She squeezed his hand back, heart soaring. The hush of pages turning, the excited chatter of children discovering books, and the knowledge that she'd found her place guided her forward. This was her emotional reward, not just a job or a romantic promise, but a hard-won sense of belonging to something real, something that reflected her true self. And that, Melanie realized, was worth every stumble along the way. Melanie Allen arrived at Howard Innovations on a crisp spring morning, feeling an unfamiliar sense of belonging. The past few months had been a whirlwind of cautious re-entry into the corporate world, but under her own name this time. No more facade, no more false titles. She carried a genuine company ID badge for her consultancy work with the Corporate Social Responsibility Department, her photograph beaming from the plastic card. Stepping through the lobby, she inhaled deeply, letting the hum of conversations and the polished gleam of the floors remind her that she had earned her spot here through honesty and a relentless desire to do good. Her day began with a meeting in a glass-walled conference room on the 18th floor, Dr. Anya Sharma was already inside, scanning a tablet loaded with data. When Melanie entered, Dr. Sharma looked up and offered a small, polite smile. The tension that had once crackled between them when Melanie's lies had first come to light had gradually softened into a workable partnership. They respected each other's roles. Dr. Sharma brought the technical expertise and academic rigor, while Melanie introduced empathy-driven insights and community outreach strategies. "Morning, Melanie," Dr. Sharma said, gesturing for her to take a seat. "I've pulled together the metrics on the Youth Literacy Initiative. The pilot schools show a 15% increase in library engagement after we introduced the tablet lending program." Melanie's eyes lit up. "That's fantastic. It means the kids are actually using the tablets to read e-books and explore new content, right? Not just playing games." "Exactly," Dr. Sharma confirmed, tapping her screen. "We use device-level analytics, strictly anonymized, of course, to confirm reading app usage. This is a tangible outcome we can present to the executive team and the board." Melanie felt a rush of gratification. In her first weeks as a CSR consultant, she had helped design the approach, short orientation sessions with school librarians, introducing specialized reading apps, and linking them to real-world book clubs for the kids. Although she lacked formal credentials, her experiences at the community libraries gave her a window into what children truly responded to. Marcus Thorne, the senior vice president who had once been her harshest skeptic, entered the room with a brisk nod. "Good morning," he said, eyes flicking from Melanie to Dr. Sharma. Though not entirely friendly, his demeanor was no longer hostile. If anything, it was perfunctory acceptance. "Let's keep this meeting efficient. Jacob wants a progress update before his next investor call. We need to prove that these philanthropic efforts also bolster the company's reputation." Dr. Sharma explained the latest analytics in concise detail, and Melanie chimed in with anecdotes from librarians praising how the new technology resources had motivated hesitant readers. Marcus typed notes on his laptop, pausing occasionally to ask pointed questions about costs and ROI. Melanie answered calmly, referencing real stories of students who had rarely checked out books before, but were now exploring entire virtual libraries. She saw something akin to approval in Marcus's eyes as he realized the program's potential benefits. The meeting wrapped up with a plan to prepare a formal presentation for Jacob Howard, summarizing the philanthropic project's initial successes. As they filed out, Marcus lingered behind for a moment, turning to Melanie. "Good work," he said gruffly. "Just make sure we stay on track with the budget. Philanthropy is worthwhile, but we need clarity on how it ties into overall strategy." She gave him a respectful nod, resisting a smile at the unusual compliment. It wasn't a warm exchange, but it felt like progress. Once upon a time, Marcus had watched her every move, waiting for her to slip. Now, he recognized her contributions, albeit with a business-focused caveat. Afterward, Melanie made her way to the CSR department's shared workspace. A window ran along the far wall, providing a sparkling view of the city below. She found Sarah Chen there, poring over promotional materials for an upcoming library fundraiser. Sarah had become not just a colleague, but a dear friend, one of the few who truly saw the depths of Melanie's transformation. "Hey," Sarah said brightly, looking up from a stack of draft flyers. "How did it go with Dr. Sharma and Marcus?" Melanie set her folder down, smiling. "It went well, actually. We have strong evidence the program is working. Even Marcus seemed on board. I need to compile a cohesive report for Jacob." She paused, letting out a small sigh of contentment. "I still can't believe I'm doing this, helping real kids discover reading, bridging corporate support with community needs. It's everything I hoped to do, but never thought possible." Sarah's face lit up. "You earned it. Everyone sees the difference you're making, and the best part, you're doing it as yourself." They spent the next hour reviewing volunteer rosters for the library fundraiser. Melanie's role was to help coordinate staff from Howard Innovations who wanted to volunteer, ensuring they understood the program's goals. She had suggested a reading buddy day, pairing employees with kids to read short stories, share conversation, and, if all went well, ignite a love of reading that would last a lifetime. At lunchtime, Melanie slipped away, heading to the in-house cafe. She picked up a salad and found a quiet table by the windows. Savoring each bite, she gazed out over the sprawling cityscape. So many days before, she had felt like an imposter in these halls, always bracing for the moment her secret would be exposed. Now, though, she felt a sense of peace she could hardly have imagined. She had discovered a new purpose, one that honored her passion for literature, her skill at understanding people, and her desire to make a difference. She thought of Jacob, the man she had once deceived, yet who had also recognized her unique gifts. Their relationship had settled into a respectful closeness, still tentative but layered with genuine affection. He was giving her space to prove herself, and in return, she was giving him honesty she had once withheld. Each small step forward, each heartfelt conversation at the library or in the office halls brought them closer to a deeper understanding. There was no need to rush anything else. Simply sharing a mission to uplift communities felt like enough for now. Finishing her lunch, she resolved to channel her energy into the upcoming fundraiser. This was her chance to show the world and herself that her worth didn't rely on grand illusions. She was just Melanie Allen, a woman with a heart for empathy and a mind that could see pathways others overlooked. Finally, she was free to pursue her calling in earnest. The elevator ride back to her desk felt lighter than air, anticipation thrumming in her veins. This new sense of purpose was everything she had yearned for, and she intended to cherish it. The day of the library fundraiser dawned crisp and bright, the sun illuminating rows of colorful booths set up outside the grand downtown library. Tables overflowing with donated books lined the sidewalk, while cheerful volunteers in matching T-shirts hurried to finalize their displays. Melanie Allen stood near the entrance, scanning the bustling scene with a mixture of pride and nerves. She'd helped plan this event for weeks, bridging Howard Innovations' resources with the library's needs. Families arrived in a steady stream. Children darted from booth to booth, receiving free bookmarks, meeting costumed storybook characters, and gathering for reading circles. Melanie's heart glowed at every wide-eyed grin and excited squeal. This was tangible proof that the philanthropic partnership mattered, real people discovering the joy of literature. A familiar voice called her name. "Melanie!" She turned to see Mrs. Gable, her former boss at Petal Pushers, walking up with a gentle smile. The older woman carried a small bouquet of daisies, adding a touch of floral charm to the fundraiser's atmosphere. "You came," Melanie said, rushing forward to give her a quick hug. "I'm so glad." Mrs. Gable nodded, her warm eyes shining with pride. "Chloe insisted we stop by. She's around here somewhere, I think, serving cappuccinos from a mobile coffee station." She handed Melanie the daisies. "I just wanted you to know how proud I am. You've come such a long way from delivering flowers to the wrong building." Melanie blushed, but gratitude filled her chest. Their connection had never faltered, even when she'd vanished from the flower shop out of shame. "Thank you," she said softly, accepting the bouquet. "This means a lot." Nearby, Sarah Chen waved frantically, beckoning Melanie over to a sign-up table. Families queued up to participate in reading buddy sessions with Howard Innovations employees. Sure enough, Chloe stood behind the table with a coffee urn, handing out lattes and mochas to volunteers. She shot Melanie a playful grin. "The cappuccinos are a big hit, Doc. I mean, just Melanie," Chloe teased. They laughed together, remembering the old mix-ups. It felt good to transform painful memories into something light-hearted. Meanwhile, Dr. Anya Sharma arrived, carrying a stack of flyers promoting future technology workshops. She offered Melanie a polite nod. "It's wonderful to see everything coming together. I'll be hosting a mini-seminar on digital reading apps in the second-floor lounge if you need me." Melanie thanked her, marveling at how far they'd come. There was no antagonism between them now, just mutual respect. Dr. Sharma's meticulous data-based approach had merged seamlessly with Melanie's community insights. They made an effective team, each learning from the other's strengths. The crowd parted, revealing Marcus Thorne, escorting a trio of investors from the company. Melanie's stomach fluttered at the sight of him leading such important guests. She discreetly smoothed her t-shirt, reminding herself that she wasn't an imposter anymore. Marcus caught her eye and inclined his head in greeting. "Gentlemen, this is Melanie Allen, who helped orchestrate our CSR efforts." He actually sounded proud. She couldn't remember ever seeing that expression on his face before. It felt like closure for the tense history they'd shared. The investors shook her hand, impressed by the vibrant turnout. While Melanie guided them through the booths, one of the investors remarked on how crucial it was to marry social impact with corporate branding. Another inquired about the cost-to-benefit ratio, which Melanie answered calmly, citing Dr. Sharma's updated research. The synergy between financial sense and emotional resonance was precisely what she'd championed during her ill-fated days, impersonating a consultant. Now, it was all out in the open, and working. A short while later, Jacob Howard arrived. He wore casual attire that still radiated quiet authority, stepping onto the library steps with an understated smile. As soon as he spotted Melanie amid the throng of families, a flicker of warmth lit his gaze. She approached him, daisies in hand, feeling the subtle tension that always accompanied their interactions, an undercurrent of unresolved feelings balanced by newfound respect. "Busy day, I see," Jacob said, gesturing to the crowd. "Turnout must be double what we projected." Melanie grinned. "At least, the kids are loving it, and the library staff says new memberships surged this morning alone. It's like a community festival, all centered on reading." Jacob nodded, slipping his hands into his pockets. "I wanted to thank you, properly, for seeing this through. You've turned a difficult start into something meaningful." He paused, eyes dropping to the daisies she held. "Are those from Mrs. Gable?" Melanie laughed softly. "Yes, a small gift to celebrate. She's here somewhere. Everyone seems to have turned up. Even Dr. Sharma is running workshops for parents and kids." Jacob's expression grew thoughtful. "And how about you? Are you enjoying your new place in all of this?" Her gaze roamed the swirling crowd, children balancing books and balloons, volunteers cheerfully handing out reading kits, Chloe's coffee station humming with activity. "Yes," she said firmly, "I feel like myself, doing something good, no lies attached." A gentle silence followed, broken by a child's excited shriek in the distance. Finally, Jacob offered a half smile. "I'm glad, truly, and I'm hoping this is just the beginning." Before she could reply, he was pulled aside by an investor wanting to snap a photo. Melanie watched him go, daisies pressed to her chest, heart light. She turned back to see Mrs. Gable, Chloe, Sarah, Dr. Sharma, and a swirl of other acquaintances who had become important threads in her tapestry of redemption. The complicated subplots of her life, her old job, the strained alliances, the friends she once avoided, had converged into a new harmony. In that moment, she realized she was no longer haunted by her past. Instead, she was shaping her future with open honesty, forging real bonds. The fundraiser buzzed around her, proof that even the most tangled mistakes could lead to unexpected grace. She tucked one of the daisies into her pocket, a keepsake of the day, and got back to work with a contented heart. 1 week after the triumphant fundraiser, Melanie found herself in a polished conference room on the 30th floor of Howard Innovations headquarters. The space was larger than usual, with an impressive view of the Manhattan skyline. A line of chairs faced the long table where the company's newest investors would soon sit. They were here to evaluate the broader philanthropic strategy and to decide if further funding was warranted. Jacob Howard had asked Melanie to co-present alongside Dr. Anya Sharma. Although Melanie had handled presentations before, this felt like the ultimate test, a chance to solidify her standing in the company as an authentic consultant. No hidden identity to bolster her, no illusions of academic titles. Just her understanding of people, her heart for community, and the results she'd helped generate. Dr. Sharma arrived first, settling her tablet on the table. She offered Melanie a nod. "Ready for the big show?" Melanie smiled, trying to disguise the butterflies in her stomach. "Ready as I'll ever be. I'm still not used to these high-level investor sessions." "It's normal to be nervous," Dr. Sharma said, her calm voice reassuring. "But I've seen you in action. You have a knack for weaving insights with empathy. Investors appreciate authenticity, especially after seeing tangible success. Focus on the community impact and the brand loyalty it creates." Moments later, Jacob entered, wearing a tailored suit that framed his tall form. He carried a thick binder of data and offered Melanie a supportive half-smile. "We'll open with a brief overview from Dr. Sharma on metrics and ROI," he said, "then pivot to you to highlight real stories from the library initiative and reading programs. The investors want to see a balanced picture." She nodded, inhaling deeply. Before she could second-guess herself, half a dozen investors filed in. Marcus Thorne joined them, greeting each with polite handshakes. Soon they took their seats, expressions expectant, notebooks and tablets at the ready. Melanie's heart thumped in her ears as she carefully placed her own notes in front of her. Dr. Sharma began with a crisp summary: adoption rates, cost analyses, user satisfaction scores. The investors listened intently, occasionally asking for clarifications. Melanie watched them, trying to gauge their moods, noticing subtle shifts in posture or eyebrow raises. She spotted a few frowns at certain budget lines. As Dr. Sharma concluded, one investor asked bluntly if the philanthropic aspect justified the expense. That was Melanie's cue. She cleared her throat, forcing her voice to stay steady. "Thank you for the question," she said. "While the philanthropic efforts are indeed an investment, we've seen measurable returns in brand perception and customer loyalty. More importantly, we're reaching segments of the community who've never interacted with Howard Innovations before." She clicked a remote, displaying photos from the recent fundraiser, smiling kids, rows of donated books, employees volunteering. Each image pulsed with genuine emotion. "These pictures tell a story beyond numbers," she said. "Parents who once felt disconnected from tech companies are now engaging with us at reading events, seeing real benefits in their children's literacy development. That goodwill builds a foundation for future innovations and future customers." One of the investors, a sharp-eyed older woman, leaned forward. "Can you give an example of how that goodwill translates into tangible business outcomes?" "We have to justify expansions to the board." Melanie nodded, having anticipated such skepticism. She recounted a specific anecdote. A school principal who, impressed by the reading program, had invited Howard Innovations to introduce a new line of kid-friendly educational tablets. "The principal was initially hesitant," Melanie explained. "But after seeing the sincerity of our library events, they felt confident we'd respect their students' needs rather than just push sales. That collaboration is now in motion, with a potential for scaled adoption across the district. She noticed the woman's skeptical expression soften at the concrete example. Encouraged, Melanie continued, referencing Dr. Sharma's data that showed brand engagement rates in participating neighborhoods had climbed by a noticeable percentage. Philanthropy isn't a hollow PR move, it's a meaningful bridge, she concluded, voice growing in conviction. The more we invest in communities, the more those communities trust us, and trust is the bedrock of long-term growth. For a moment, the room stilled. Then the investors began firing off more questions, ranging from expansion timelines to synergy with the main product line. Melanie fielded them as calmly as she could, weaving personal stories with factual outcomes. Dr. Sharma supplied additional data when needed, and Jacob stepped in to underscore the strategic fit with Howard Innovation's overarching goals. As the meeting wrapped up, an investor with a neatly trimmed beard offered a measured nod. It's refreshing to see actual human faces behind these philanthropic strategies. Far too often, we see sanitized slides, but no real substance. Thank you for the depth you've shown here. Relief blossomed in Melanie's chest. Dr. Sharma smiled slightly, and Jacob looked proud. Even Marcus appeared satisfied, arms no longer folded. The group rose, collecting their files. Promises were made to follow up soon, with positive hints about additional funding. One by one, they left, leaving Melanie and the others in the conference room, the city's skyline gleaming behind them. The air felt electric. Melanie realized she had just passed what felt like her final crucible, the ultimate test, confirming her transformation from timid flower delivery girl and accidental imposter to a legitimate contributor whose insights genuinely mattered. A surge of gratitude swelled in her throat. Jacob approached, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. "You did it," he said, his voice low but filled with warmth. "They're convinced. More importantly, I can see how much you believe in this work." Melanie blinked back the sting of tears. "Yes," she whispered, "I really do." They shared a moment of silence, letting the magnitude of what had just happened settle in. She had faced scrutiny without the shield of a false identity and had triumphed. She was undeniably Melanie Allen, a woman whose empathy and vision now stood on equal footing with the world of big business. For the first time in her life, she felt entirely at peace with who she was. Over the following weeks, the ripple effects of Melanie's work spread through Howard Innovations and the wider community. With new investor commitments secured, the philanthropic projects expanded faster than anyone anticipated. Local library branches received upgraded reading facilities. New after-school programs sprang up, pairing volunteer mentors with young readers. As momentum built, so did the company's reputation for empathetic engagement. Melanie spent her days shuttling between CSR meetings at the office and on-site visits to various community centers. Each stop revealed a fresh story of hope. A teacher who saw previously shy students bursting with excitement over digital reading apps, a librarian who noted record-high membership sign-ups, or a parent relieved to see their child finally enthralled by books. The changes within Howard Innovations were equally significant. Employees who once scoffed at soft ideas like empathy now embraced the shift in corporate culture. Department heads encouraged staff to volunteer. Some launched internal book clubs, spurred by Melanie's passion for storytelling. Others contributed time and resources to literacy drives. Even the once skeptical Marcus Thorne admitted at a department gathering that empathy is an asset, not a liability, surprising everyone, including himself. Meanwhile, Sarah Chen thrived in her marketing role, collaborating closely with Melanie to design promotional materials that showcase the real faces behind the philanthropic data. Their synergy felt effortless, Sarah handling the polished corporate branding, Melanie infusing each campaign with heartfelt narratives of librarians, students, and parents. Their friendship deepened beyond office hours, with occasional coffee dates at Chloe's cafe or evenings spent discussing new ways to expand reading programs. Dr. Andya Sharma, ever the data-driven specialist, found a renewed sense of purpose in seeing how her metrics fed directly into tangible community improvements. Sometimes, she and Melanie would share a quiet coffee break, discussing the broader implications of bridging technology and literature. There was no longer any lingering tension about imposture. Instead, a mutual recognition that they formed two halves of a bigger, more effective whole. At the center of it all stood Jacob Howard. The CEO's leadership style had shifted subtly, thanks in part to Melanie's influence. He met with employees in roundtable discussions, openly asking for input on how to make the company more people-centric. He even revived an old dream of supporting an arts program for underprivileged communities, revealing a once-hidden love of creative expression. Under this renewed leadership, Howard Innovations blossomed into a place that valued not only profits, but also the well-being of the neighborhoods it served. Outside of the corporate sphere, Melanie reconnected with her old life in Brooklyn. Mrs. Gable, in a heartwarming gesture, invited her back to Petal Pushers one afternoon to show off new floral arrangements. Melanie helped deliver a few bouquets again for old time's sake, this time to the correct addresses, she joked with self-effacing humor. She realized that she could appreciate the simple joy of flowers without feeling trapped in that role as her only path. Chloe, too, reaped benefits from Melanie's new connections. With so many volunteers and staff bustling around the library and corporate events, Chloe's cafe catering service found new customers. "If all your philanthropic gigs bring me extra coffee orders, I'm a fan," Chloe teased, hugging Melanie gratefully after a particularly big order from the marketing department. Even David, Jacob's tireless assistant, appeared less burdened. Thanks to the positive buzz around the company's community involvement, Jacob's schedule grew hectic, but also more purposeful. David once confided to Melanie that for the first time in years, he saw Jacob truly smiling after meetings, seemingly energized rather than exhausted by corporate demands. On a sunny Saturday, Melanie visited the main library downtown to assist with a storytelling workshop. She caught sight of a shy teenager she recognized from earlier sessions. He fidgeted near a display of young adult novels, flipping the pages but never committing to a book. Melanie approached with a gentle smile, recommending one of her own favorites, an adventure novel filled with humor and heart. He looked skeptical, mumbling he wasn't much of a reader, but she coaxed him into giving it a try, explaining how she'd once felt invisible too. His curiosity piqued. He took the novel and wandered off to find a quiet corner. Later, as the workshop concluded, she glimpsed him engrossed in the story, eyes bright with interest. It was a small moment, but it reminded her of how far she'd come, from a timid flower delivery girl quoting classics in her head, to someone able to spark another person's sense of wonder. Leaving the library that afternoon, Melanie paused on the stone steps, letting the sunshine warm her face. Around her, people bustled, families carrying borrowed books, staff hauling boxes of donated titles, local kids giggling about the latest reading challenge. And interwoven in that tapestry, she saw the result of her journey. Each smile, each spark of curiosity, each open door was a testament to how a single, seemingly impossible mistake could transform into a powerful catalyst for good. With her phone buzzing in her bag, likely another message from Sarah about an upcoming event, Melanie descended the steps, feeling lighter than ever. Her choices had impacted not just her own destiny, but the lives of countless others in ways she never could have predicted. No longer weighed down by guilt, she carried with her a renewed sense of purpose. Grateful for the second chance she'd been given and determined to keep paying it forward, the final month of the school year arrived with a swirl of excitement. Howard Innovations officially announced an expanded sponsorship for the Read More initiative, marking a pivotal moment in the company's philanthropic evolution. At the heart of it all stood Melanie Allen, who found herself simultaneously assisting with rollout plans and preparing for a personal milestone, the publication of her very first collection of short stories, encouraged by Jacob, Sarah, and even Mrs. Gable. Melanie had finally gathered the courage to compile her reflections, some based on her experiences at the library, others spun from her lifelong fascination with human nature. The stories touched on themes of identity, truth, and unexpected second chances. She titled the collection Between Petals and Pages, a nod to her own path from flower deliveries to literary advocacy. On a breezy Friday evening, the downtown library hosted a cozy book launch to celebrate not just the new philanthropic push, but also Melanie's self-published work. Friends, co-workers, and community members trickled in, milling about the reading room adorned with simple floral arrangements. Mrs. Gable contributed mini bouquets on each table, and Chloe's Cafe provided hot beverages and pastries. Dr. Anya Sharma and Sarah Chen chatted at one corner, while David assisted with setup, shifting chairs into neat rows near a small podium. Stepping onto that makeshift stage, Melanie felt a flutter of nerves reminiscent of her earliest presentations. Except now she stood before a supportive crowd as herself, with nothing to hide. In the front row, she spotted Jacob, hands folded, a slight smile softening his usually composed demeanor. She took a breath, heart swelling with gratitude. "Thank you all for coming," Melanie began, voice trembling a little. "Some of you know me from the corporate side, some from the library, some from petal pushers. Wherever we met, you've all been part of my journey. These stories I've written are personal and, in a way, a tribute to the winding roads we each walk, filled with stumbles, unexpected turns, and, hopefully, growth." A ripple of encouraging applause followed. She read a short excerpt from one of her tales, describing a character who accidentally enters a grand building and is mistaken for someone important. The crowd chuckled knowingly. Beneath the humor, the story delved into themes of self-worth and the fear of being seen as a fraud. When she finished, the room erupted in warm claps. Melanie blinked back tears, overwhelmed by how far she'd come. Afterward, guests mingled, sipping coffee and leafing through copies of Between Petals and Pages. Many asked for autographs, and Melanie obliged with a mix of shyness and delight. Mrs. Gable approached with misty eyes, hugging her tight. "You've shown the world what I always knew," the older woman said. "Your words matter." A few steps away, Marcus Thorne offered a courteous nod, a faint ghost of a smile at his lips. "Congratulations, Ms. Allen," he said, holding a signed copy of her book. I read one of your stories earlier. It was insightful." His awkward sincerity touched her deeply. Even the once bristly vice president had softened enough to find value in her writing. As the evening mellowed, Jacob found her near a table stacked with freshly sold books. His gaze flicked to the cover, tracing the title with a finger. "You did it," he said softly, pride shining in his eyes. "You put your voice into the world." She met his gaze, her cheeks warming under his appreciative look. "I wouldn't have done it without your encouragement and the experiences I've had these past months. Thank you for not giving up on me." He shook his head. "You earned every step of this. All I did was open a door." For a moment, they stood silent, memories passing between them, from that chaotic first meeting to the painful confrontation, followed by hard-won reconciliation. Lowering his voice, he added, "You know, a year ago, I was just another CEO chasing innovation without remembering the heart behind it. Then those 5 minutes with you, wrong building and all, changed my path. And now, seeing you flourish, seeing the difference you've made in people's lives, reminds me every day why I started all this." Her eyes glistened. "It's been a wild ride." A gentle smile curved her lips. "But I'm grateful for every twist." Tentatively, he touched her hand, thumb brushing across her knuckles. This time, there was no tension, no leftover mistrust, just a delicate intimacy and mutual respect. She tightened her hold, letting the contact speak for them both. They had chosen to heal instead of remain broken, to trust instead of doubt. This blossoming moment, set amid the hum of library lights and murmuring voices, felt like the culmination of every step they'd taken, separately and together. Around them, the library glowed with possibility, new books, new faces, new futures. Children's laughter rang from the corners, mingling with the satisfied murmurs of adults flipping pages. In the space that had once symbolized the confrontation of Melanie's lies, she now stood in full truth. The library had become a beacon of honest growth, not just for her, but for everyone touched by these initiatives. Releasing Jacob's hand, Melanie surveyed the scene. Chloe laughing with Sarah, Dr. Sharma demonstrating an e-reading app to a curious parent, David orchestrating the final details of the evening with calm efficiency, and Mrs. Gable gracefully accepting thanks for her floral contributions. Each person represented a piece of the tapestry she'd woven, each subplot now merging into a harmonious whole. A sweet surge of emotion welled up. This was her new equilibrium, a life woven from integrity, personal growth, and the relationships she'd earned. She could write, she could serve, she could innovate, and she could love. The humble girl, who once slipped through grand doors by mistake, had found a home in the very realm that once seemed so unattainable. And as she pressed her newly published book to her chest, feeling its reassuring weight, she knew that her story, this time entirely her own, was just beginning. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.